story can be told.
That was Emily Wither, ending this edition of the programme. I'm Pascal Harter. The producer was Polly Hope, and you can hear more from around the world, including thoughts on the impasse at the top of France's government on the From Our Own Correspondent podcast. And we'll be back with more stories next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme From Our Own Correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We are live, and this is Information Radio. You're on CBC from downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, on YouTube. Thank you wherever you're joining us this morning. We're going to get some snow today in Winnipeg, 2 to 4 centimeters, and our temperature is going to fall to around -5 this afternoon, and it's going to be a little bit windy, so we'll have some active weather. But man, it's been mild and slushy. My drive-in was all about the slush this morning. Yours might be too. If you need us on the drive, 788-3093 is the traffic line. The morning show is on until 8:37 a.m. Who's here to do it? Mr. Corey Funk. Corey directs the show and covers the commute. Good morning, Corey. Good morning, Mr. Abby Adeyemi, with another fine toque on his head. It's Abby's December thing. We'll get a different toque every day if we're lucky. Abby's our technical producer, and also will be covering the weather on the air with us. And good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, who is our YouTube producer. You can check out Kev giving you a wave on YouTube. All right, the mail's going to get moving. Heather's here to give a huge headline this morning, if you haven't heard this yet. What has been developing in the news, Heather Wells?
Good morning. Yeah, Canada Post says operations will resume tomorrow after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered a return to work. That month-long strike stopping the postal system right before the Christmas season. Last night, Canada Post said it had agreed with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers to implement a 5% wage increase. It's going to be retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expired 1 year ago. We'll be hearing more about this coming up on World Report in just a couple of minutes. And a Winnipeg vasectomy provider, Dr. Errol Billenkoff, says every day more young childless men are walking in asking for vasectomies. We'll hear that story coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
And that story is actually part of our series we've been doing, looking at the trend across Canada with the declining fertility rate, and also looking at people's decisions around not having children or going childless. And so we will have that story for you coming up later. Corey actually was the lead producer, rather journalist on that story. So we'll have that later. In addition, Canada Post. Yeah, let's find out more about what's going on. World Report, the latest in national and international news, is coming up right away. And then after World Report, we're going to hear more about a special turkey dinner coming up at the Salvation Army. So stay tuned for all of it.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Michael Healy has spent his career seeking out Canadian stories that some see as boring, but he turns them into captivating, provocative, and award-winning theater. He'll be here to tell you why his latest work is about what happened when Google tried to build a neighborhood in Toronto.
My goal is to entertain 200 people a night. That's number one, right?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with El-Amin Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Canada Post says operations will resume Tuesday morning. The company and the union have agreed to a 5% wage increase. It will be retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expired. The Canada Industrial Relations Board said negotiations were at an impasse, and it was under strict instructions to order the 55,000 employees back to work if a deal could not be done by the end of the year. Janella Hamilton has more.
About 55,000 striking Canada Post employees are being ordered back on the job. It comes after 2 days of negotiations at hearings by the country's Labour Board. On Sunday, the board ruled the two sides are at an impasse. Earlier this week, the federal Labour minister said if the board determined there was an impasse, it would order union members back to work under the existing collective agreement until May 22nd of next year. Canada Post says it has agreed with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers to implement a 5% wage increase, less than what the union had previously been asking for. On Friday, Cup W was strongly critical of the federal government's intervention. CBC News has reached out to the union for comment. Canada Post says it is expecting workers back on the job at 8 a.m. Tuesday. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
With Liberals riding low in the polls and Canadians facing an affordability crisis, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is about to release her fall economic statement. This economic update is expected to be big on spending, including $1 billion in new border measures and the GST holiday that started on Saturday. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how sustainable is all that red ink?
Marcia, we're going to hear the finance minister argue today that her big deficit is affordable based on the size and strength of Canada's economy. But the Bank of Canada warned last week that recent economic growth has been driven by Canada's surging population. So once the immigration cut announced earlier this fall kicks in, the bank's economic forecast could be cut back too. So if you're Chrystia Freeland, how do you make up for that? On Friday, she laid out some $26 billion worth of tax incentives for companies that conduct research in Canada, an attempt to boost the venture capital market, help more startups by easing restrictions on how Canadian pension funds invest. Canada's facing a serious threat as the U.S. wants to keep all its business investment to itself. And if steep tariffs are slapped on too, that further drags down Canada's economy. The $1 billion border package we're expecting today is an attempt to keep those tariffs at bay. But that, plus all the social safety net enhancements that New Democrats have demanded in this parliament, adds up. And that could be why we saw the government sell off its 6% stake in Air Canada last week, and why ministers are pretty open about not having a parliamentary partner to proceed with the $250 rebate checks. After all, that will also trim $4 billion from the deficit in the short term. This kind of scrambling, though, doesn't inspire confidence. Or, as Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada put it on CBC Radio's The House this weekend,
it looks like a government that's looking under the sofa's cushions for all the money it can find to pay for its spending habits.
CBC News has also learned Housing Minister Sean Fraser is about to announce he is leaving cabinet and not running in the next federal election. How does that affect what happens today?
Well, it means that we might see a last-minute cabinet shuffle now, too, before the holiday break. On top of losing his housing minister and also one of the top performers in Atlantic Canada, Justin Trudeau has now lost his transport minister, his employment minister. Other ministers have been juggling 2 or 3 portfolios as a result. That's not sustainable. 4 more have signaled they aren't going to run again and need to be replaced. And if they're all out, who's in? Former central bank governor Mark Carney isn't an MP, but the prospect of him being named to cabinet anyway is the rumor that just won't die in this town. But if he's joining, that could make today the current finance minister's swan song.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. CBC News will have coverage of the fall economic statement delivered by Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland this afternoon. Join co-host Catherine Cullen in Ottawa and Tom Harrington in Toronto starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBC Radio, or you can stream it live on the CBC News app. Just tap on the word local. A verdict is expected any day now in a French rape trial that has captured the world's attention. 51 men are accused of raping Gisèle Pellicot after she was drugged by her husband. Gisèle attended almost every day of the trial, facing her ex-husband, who admitted to arranging the assaults against her. Now the judges begin deliberations. Sarah Levitt has more from the French village at the center of the allegations.
It seems like a regular holiday scene. Festive music blaring from loudspeakers and a Christmas market taking up the main square of a small French town. But in Mazan, in southern France, there's a cloud over the celebrations. The story of the rapist of Mazan, Pauline de Peretti says, stopping there. She's talking about Dominique Pellicot, who admits over years he recruited men online to come over to his house and rape his drugged wife, Gisèle Pellicot. If many know the details, it's in part due to the 51 men on trial for allegedly taking part, yes, but mostly for Gisèle Pellicot's decision to waive her anonymity. Her well-mediatized attendance at the trial, which started in September, has been applauded by many. "I'm doing it for all rape victims," she said. "We're waiting for the verdicts impatiently," says Yannick Richard, who has lived in Mazan for 21 years. He calls Gisèle Pellicot a heroine and the smudge on the town a shame. The details of the case have horrified many. Dominique Pellicot has pleaded guilty, calling himself a rapist as well as the other men involved. 14 others have also pleaded guilty, the rest not guilty. This week, the 5 judges will be deliberating with a decision that comes with sentencing by Friday at the latest. And as Christmas approaches, many in Mazan hope justice is rendered. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Mazan, France.
People pick through piles of debris on the French island territory of Mayotte. Hundreds, possibly thousands, are feared dead after Cyclone Chido hit the Indian Ocean Islands over the weekend. Many of the people on Mayotte were already living in makeshift houses and slums. Now they have no homes, no food, and no clean drinking water. Eric Samba is with French Red Cross. He is on the French island of Reunion, which is sending aid to Mayotte.
We have shelter toolkits and tarpaulins for the construction of shelters. We have also jerry cans, buckets, soaps to make sure that there is proper use of water. We have water treatment units also that are ready to be deployed to provide drinking water to the population.
Chido is being called the worst cyclone to hit the Indian Ocean Islands in nearly 100 years. Air Canada is being put in the hot seat just as the busy holiday travel season begins. Some passengers say their airline is allowing them to be overcharged for baggage, and it faces no fines. The customers who reached out to CBC's Go Public team say Air Canada also refuses to compensate them. Erica Johnson has the story.
I was pretty upset and pretty disappointed.
Rob Eadson bought 3 Air Canada tickets for his family to fly from Ottawa to San Diego. They were a code share, meaning Air Canada sold the tickets, but the flights were operated by another airline, United. He paid a higher fare to include 1 bag per person. But when they checked in at United, the agent insisted Eadson cough up for 3 bags again.
And he just told me that's an Air Canada receipt. It doesn't apply to United. And we would have to pay for bags.
He got dinged for baggage again on the flights home. Eadson filed for compensation, but Air Canada denied the claim.
For them to just stonewall you and say no is really disappointing.
It's also violating federal rules that say when passengers have a ticket to and from Canada that involves more than one airline, carriers must apply a single set of baggage rules. John Graddick is an aviation analyst.
It's a question of Air Canada dropping the ball in making sure United knows the conditions of the fare that the passenger was ticketed on for this United Airlines flight.
Rob Eadson did get an unexpected refund after we contacted Air Canada, but it came from United. Meantime, Go Public has heard from other Air Canada passengers who were also overcharged for baggage. In all cases, the airline says it was an error. In the past 7 years, Air Canada has been fined for violating the rules. Never. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the most read story at cbcnews.ca. It's on our main page. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio and your morning show. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. It's slushy in Winnipeg. Elsewhere, it's different in terms of the what's happening on the roadways, and we're going to tell you in a moment about a couple of school divisions that are having challenges with transportation. So there's some bus cancellations this morning, this Monday morning across Manitoba. We'll get into that in a moment. Also, we're going to have more on Canada Post. So we heard the headline, we heard the story, but what does it all mean for you? We'll try to dig into as much as we know this hour. In addition, we're going to hear what's happening over at the Salvation Army. 1,600 turkey dinners are being made to feed guests there at their annual Christmas dinner in Winnipeg. We're going to talk to Mark Stewart, who's the executive back there will tell us more how that it will impact the community. And then a little bit later this hour, from faulty health advice to fake videos, there's a lot online you cannot trust. We'll hear about a way to get teenagers directly more involved and savvy at spotting misinformation. Right now, though, for more on today's top stories, here's Heather Wells.
Morning. Well, 3 Manitoba nurses were punished earlier this year for not reporting past convictions for impaired driving. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba discovered the convictions in annual targeted background checks. 2 nurses who pleaded guilty to professional misconduct were ordered to pay more than $10,000 each. Another was censured and fined $1,000. We're going to hear from a nursing professor coming up. And as we just heard on World Report, Canada Post says mail starts moving again tomorrow. Good news for small businesses. They have been turning to holiday markets to give shoppers the chance to get gifts in person after a month without postal delivery. We'll take you to a holiday market coming up in our next news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells. Heather's with us through the morning. Right now, let's go to Abby Adiemi, who's here with our weather forecast. Good morning.
Good morning. I'll tell you, be prepared for a wintry day. Light snow, blowing snow. That's what's in the forecast for much of the province today. And we will be feeling some significant cold in some parts of the province. But right now, Winnipeg, it's a mild stat. We are at 0 at this time. Light snow outside. This snow is going to continue. We should see about 2 to 4 centimeters accumulation as the day goes by, and then we drop to -5 later, just making it a bit chilly on this snowy day.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We're the warm spot in the province right now at 0. Now, outside the city, the roadways are in different conditions. So all buses in Mountain View School Division are canceled because of poor road conditions. That's the buses. School closures, if any, will be determined at some point this morning. Right now, we don't have any information about that, just that all buses in Mountain View are canceled rather. Brandon School Division is not operating the buses outside of the city of Brandon for this morning. In addition, Alexander O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are closed today, and buses will run in the city of Brandon. As usual in that division, attendance is at parental discretion where travel is required, but call the school if you can't attend. And be careful. All right. Corey Funk has popped in to remind us of the commute number.
Yeah, and just poor highway conditions all around. And a reminder that actually there's a couple highway closures around Roblin in particular. So Highway 5 and Highways 83 right around Roblin. Highway 83 running, from just north of Roblin all the way down to about Binscarth is closed, as well as Highway 5 from Roblin to Grandview. So just heads up there. Across the province, poor visibility and covered highway conditions are being reported. So just be careful there. If you want to give me an update on anything else you're seeing, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Pretty poor conditions all around the highways. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey Funk. Well, next on the program, as I mentioned, the Salvation Army annual community Christmas dinner is happening this week on Wednesday. It's hosted at the Winnipeg Centre of Hope, where we broadcast from in March, actually, this year. Staff and volunteers have been working hard. They prepare 1,600 free meals for some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Executive Director of the Winnipeg Centre of Hope, Mark Stewart, is on the line this morning to talk about it. Hi, Mark.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. How are you guys doing preparing all these dinners, getting ready?
It's a lot of work. So we've already, I think we're up to 80 turkeys already that we're going to be preparing. So 80 turkeys and a lot of gravy, a lot of potatoes, a lot of carrots. So we're all underway right now.
We've been talking so much this year about food insecurity and rising prices. I mean, it's really significant, obviously. How has that impacted you guys over at the Salvation Army in terms of trying to meet the needs of people?
Well, food has increased for sure. So as the food has increased, that's affected our budgets. And, so we're seeing just 2 days ago, we had 440 people just in our building staying for the night. And that doesn't include the people that are coming in through the day, wanting to eat lunch, wanting to stay for dinner. So it has affected us just in increased numbers directly within our shelter, but through other programs that we have in the community, we know that our food cupboards are kind of getting empty as well. So we're just doing the best that we can to try to provide whatever we can for people that come in.
In terms of the needs out there and the numbers, you said 440 people overnight. Is that what you said?
That was last night and the night before. We had just over 440 people.
And how does that compare to, what you've been having on average, especially during it's warm this morning, but I mean, obviously last week was so cold.
Yeah, so that is pretty high. I mean, we should actually be sitting around 340 people. So this year, as an average, it's been just over 400 people. So we're not surprised with the numbers. We know that when it does get colder, our numbers go up. But again, working with our partner organizations, we all just want to make sure that people get in from the cold, have a warm place to sleep. And then as the dinners kind of come up around this time of year, like ours is a bit of an annual dinner and we have it every year. Last year we served just under 1,000 people, but we are just expecting a higher number this year. We've been talking to more organizations, more residential organizations who don't get that opportunity for a turkey dinner. And it's really just a gift that we can give back to our community and be in solidarity with the people that are experiencing homelessness to say that we understand that it's terrible to be homeless, and we want to do whatever we can to make you feel like you have a family, not just 365 days of the year, but definitely when it gets closer to Christmas.
What's it like when this dinner's served for people? I mean, obviously there must be joy and appreciation on all sides, but what's that feel like?
I think that there's a couple things that happen, and there's a real education that's given to the volunteers that come in. We have over 70 volunteers that are coming in, and it gives them a real education about, what homelessness is, and it also gives them an opportunity to hear the stories of the people that we serve. And I think that that's really important. I think that we need to do more education in our community about what our organizations actually do, and then it gives the volunteers an opportunity to kind of jump in wherever they can and use their skills to kind of help us work with people that are homeless. We can't do it all on our own, and I think we've been very clear about that. But for the people that are coming, I'm hoping that it just gives them a safe place where they can kind of come in, tell their story, have a hot meal, and not feel alone. Homelessness, houselessness is very lonely, and I feel that, from stories that I've heard, they sometimes feel like people have just given up on them, and we haven't. We haven't given up on them. We're fighting for them every day. We're fighting for more resources, and we just want to continue to let people know that you're houseless right now. We can try to do the best we can to help you, get you out of houselessness, and get you back on your feet. And then you can come back and help us volunteer and serve the people where you were and have that real lived experience lens from people.
Which is what you did.
It's exactly what I did in a small way. I've been able to have that opportunity, and it's giving back has changed my life, and that's, we're not trying to change lives in the sense of change who people are, but we just want to give people a hand up and give them the opportunity to see that people do care about them.
You've shared your story on the air before, so obviously I know you lived for a time in your car in your life. Did you ever were you in that situation over the holidays?
Luckily, I was actually, during that period of time, I was sleeping in my car, and it was in the winter. Again, luckily, I had family support, and when I was able to kind of get out of that situation, I did. But it was just before Christmas, and I remember, feeling, that I really didn't have anything. I had no options, but at the same time, I had no support. I had no family. When really I did have a lot of people around me that cared. It's hard to see those things when you're when you're houseless. It's hard to see that people care about you. It's hard to see that people want better for you. And again, just by us opening our doors on the 18th, we get an opportunity to show people that. On top of that, it's also an opportunity for us to partner with other agencies. So we have Teen Challenge, who's a great organization. They come in and help us with the dinner. The next day on the 19th, we actually give 300 meals to Lighthouse Mission, and then they're able to serve a meal during the day for anybody that we may have missed. And then also on Christmas Day, we serve another dinner on Christmas Day just for the participants that live in our building. And we have volunteers come in, and everybody that lives in our building gets a gift. And within our family shelter, we've been working very hard to make sure that all the kids on Christmas Day have a present under the tree through our Toy Mountain. So it's really a busy time right now, but really it's all just about giving and giving back to our community.
Well, thank you for giving some time this morning to tell us about what you do in community. Appreciate you, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. That was Mark Stewart, Executive Director of the Winnipeg Center of Hope in Winnipeg. Salvation Army's annual Christmas dinner is happening at the center on December 18th, so that's Wednesday. And tickets have already been organized through the member agencies. Maybe you're volunteering there this week, or maybe you're going to be heading out for dinner, or you've been helping. 6:21 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3. I'm Marcy Mark, who says 0 in Winnipeg, slushy, and the highways could be tricky this morning. Well, we have kind of a bonus presentation because normally you hear Dr. Raj Bardwaj on Wednesday mornings, but we have a column this morning talking about some of the estimates that say about 20% of people in Canada aren't connected to a family doctor, and that causes major issues when you're looking specifically at, all kinds of things, but the cancer diagnosis issue is a pretty big one. Let's talk more about that or hear more about it with Dr. Raj Bardwaj. He actually, obviously, is our medical columnist, but he actually did an update column on this with Corey.
Good morning, Corey.
So, first of all, just tell us more about this study. What do you make of these numbers?
Yeah, so this study didn't specify how or where the diagnosis of cancer was made. They just said that of the people who were diagnosed, about 35% of them were seen in the ER in the 90 days before. And they found that the most common emergency department diagnoses were often related to the cancer. Like if someone had colon cancer, they often went to the ER because of stomach pain. Or if they had bladder cancer, their ER visit was often because of difficulty urinating. There are other studies that have looked at where the actual cancer diagnosis is made, and they found that in Canada, anywhere from about 16 to 50% of cancers are first identified or suspected via the emergency department, depending on the type of cancer. And the authors of this study basically say that in a perfect world, that's too many. The ER isn't a great place to be told that you have cancer. They also point out that patients whose cancer is diagnosed via the ER tend to have worse outcomes, a worse stage of cancer, a lower overall survival, independent of stage. And if you look at the characteristics of the people who got diagnosed with cancer in the ER, they tended to be older, sometimes sort of marginalized from the healthcare system, whether that was due to being racialized or being lower socioeconomic status or just less access to primary care, sometimes because they live in rural or remote areas.
And what about the rates of ER visits? Do they vary kind of based on the kinds of cancers as well?
Yeah, so it did. So it was more likely that your cancer would be discovered in the ER if it was a brain tumor or a cancer of the liver or gallbladder or stomach or pancreas, compared to, say, breast cancer. And that kind of makes sense from a couple of different reasons. So one is if you think of things like breast cancer, I mean, we've got screening programs set up for breast cancer. People are told, go get your mammogram whether or not you have any symptoms. We've got similar programs for colon cancer, prostate cancer, things like that. And those programs do a good job of finding cancers before they cause symptoms. And before those symptoms they cause might end up someone in the ER. But things like, brain tumors or stomach or pancreatic cancers, we don't have programs like that. And those cancers generally don't cause a lot of symptoms until they're advanced enough to cause symptoms, which then drives people to the ER, right? The other thing that happens in the ER is that people sort of come in for one thing and then we do tests on them and we end up sort of finding a cancer that wasn't symptomatic. So let's say they come in for a stomach ache and we end up doing, for example, an ultrasound, and maybe we incidentally find an ovarian cancer that wasn't causing their symptoms of stomach ache, but we caught it on that test, sort of, serendipitously.
So I meant when something like that happens, when you're the attending doctor, how do you handle something like that?
It's a tough situation, obviously, to have to break bad news to people, and the ER makes that harder because it's an ER. It's loud. There's no privacy. Often there's just a curtain between people. Our attention is being pulled in a lot of different directions at once by other emergencies and by time pressures and stuff. Ideally, if we're going to be breaking bad news to someone, we want a private spot. No interruptions. We want people to have someone there for support, like a family member. We'd like to have the time and space to be able to answer all their questions and to be able to clearly discuss the next steps in their medical journey. And it's tough in a busy ER to get any of those, let alone all of those things. Also, if a person's in the ER, they're usually already in some discomfort. And sometimes there's, limited emotional bandwidth to deal with sort of big picture stuff, like how is this diagnosis going to change your life in the short term and in the long term. So yeah, it's one of the hardest parts of the job. I think it really defines the art of medicine instead of the science of medicine. It's humbling to be part of that journey with the person. In terms of how we do it, I think it's important that we're direct and that we're not trying to hide behind either really vague language or hiding behind medical jargon. If it's cancer, we need to say the word cancer, not just, a spot on your lung or a mass on your liver, or the flip side where it's medical jargon and we say something like, an adenocarcinoma or some such thing. I think it's also important not to overwhelm people with detailed information right at the beginning. There's a lot of research that shows that people sort of stop hearing you once you drop the C word and actually say cancer. And of course, different people take bad news differently. I've had some people who basically shrugged, and said, yeah, that's what I thought it was. And they were ready for a lot more information and details compared to others. So other than being honest and kind, I think there's no perfect way to break bad news. There's no right or perfect way to receive it either. We're all different, and each person's situation is really unique.
So then what's your advice for people, who don't want to become one of those people that get that bad news when they go to the ER?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Like bad things happen to good people all the time, and a lot of times out of our control. But I would say that if you do have access to a family doctor, please use that access. Make sure to get checked out regularly. Make sure that you're up to date on screening tests for cancers that we can screen for. So things like mammograms to look for breast cancer and pap tests to screen for cervical cancer, and sometimes even chest x-rays and blood tests in some specific circumstances. Also, there are symptoms that make us worry that you shouldn't ignore, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you have cancer, but it means that you should talk to somebody sooner rather than later, right? So things like unexpected or unexplained weight loss over weeks or months, blood where you don't expect it, right? So blood in your stool, blood in your pee, coughing up blood, lumps that you can feel that weren't there before. They don't have to be painful to be worrisome. A cough that becomes chronic, or a change in your voice that lasts more than a couple of weeks, especially if you're a smoker. Those are all things that should be checked out, ideally by a family doctor rather than in the emergency department. And you should be getting, hopefully a good medical history and a physical exam, and depending on sort of what's going on, maybe some blood tests or imaging based on the particular situation. But you got to remember, this is the sort of thing that family doctors are experts at. And this isn't something that we as individuals can fix, but I think it's really important that we lean on our governments and we really pressure them to fix the family doctor shortage, fix access to things like, mammograms and stuff, even if you don't have a family doctor, and improve lab access and imaging access, things like ultrasounds and stuff, and even access to things like cancer clinics and cancer specialists so that we can get there in a timely manner. I think it's a huge problem. And, even though the cancer rates are going down, because of the aging population in Canada, the actual number of cancer diagnoses is actually going up. And, even though I would say the ER, I agree with these authors of this study, the ER is not the best place to get a cancer diagnosis. But I think the best place to get it, is ultimately as soon as we suspect that it might be cancer, you should be told, regardless of where that place happens to be.
Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So that's our medical column with Dr. Raj Bardwaj in conversation there with Corey Funk. And the study, by the way, they were talking about, I neglected to mention it off the top, I apologize, was done recently from the Canadian Medical Association Journal. Stay tuned. We have business news, and in the news this morning, business is about to be moving. Heather Wells is here with some details.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 0 in Winnipeg with some snow. We're expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of snow today, and it's going to become blowing snow as that wind picks up this afternoon and our temperature falls to -5 this afternoon. Canada Post says its operations will resume tomorrow after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered a return to work. The strike began November 15th, 1 month ago, stopping the postal system right before the busy Christmas mailing season. Last night, Canada Post said it agreed with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers to implement a 5% wage increase. It will be retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expired 1 year ago. You can hear more on this story in reaction to it coming up on World Report at 7. More young men are getting vasectomies, even though they've never had children. Winnipeg's Dr. Errol Bilenkoff has noticed it, and he says he's not the only one.
First, I thought I was the only one who was noticing this because I don't really discuss it with other doctors, but I am part of an international chat group where doctors who do vasectomies participate, and the topic came up. And it's like everybody noticed. It was just that obvious.
Bilenkoff thinks the rising cost of living and mental health crisis are to blame. He says more people now realize they don't have the mental or financial capability to raise a child. You can hear more on this story coming up at 8:10 this morning right here on Information Radio. 3 Manitoba nurses were fined this year after failing to report past convictions for impaired driving. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba discovered the convictions in annual targeted background checks. It ordered 2 nurses to pay more than $10,000 each. Another was censured and fined $1,000. Sonia Udod is a nursing professor at the University of Manitoba. She says facing a disciplinary panel can be frightening.
There's kind of 2 sides to this, but I think that nurses are afraid to be honest because they're afraid of the repercussions. And it would be helpful, I think, if there was a process in place to help the nurses get the help they need.
The college says it does offer nurses a remedial program. Well, holiday markets are giving shoppers the chance to get gifts in person, especially needed after more than a month of no Canada Post delivery. In Winnipeg yesterday, shoppers packed via Union Station for an Indigenous handmade market. Shauna Fontaine is one of the founders. She says the postal strike is giving people more incentive to shop local.
For the artisans, this is their bread and butter. This is what puts food on the table and supports their families and their economy. So this is really, really critical for them, especially at this time of year.
Canada Post says, as we've been hearing, that its workers will be back on the job tomorrow. Winnipeg firefighters were called to fires in 3 vacant buildings yesterday. The first just after 3 in the afternoon at a house on Manitoba near McGregor. Then at 4:30, a second fire in the north end at a boarded house on Selkirk. And a vacant apartment building on Woodrow Place then caught fire just before 6 last evening. The city says no one was hurt in any of the fires. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland presents a fall economic update today.
When we table the fall economic statement on Monday, the debt to GDP ratio for 23-24, which we put forward in the 24 budget, will be met.
But pundits say they expect the Trudeau Liberal government will break its promise to keep the federal deficit capped at $40 billion. The parliamentary budget officer projects the deficit will be closer to $47 billion. And CBC News has learned Housing Minister Sean Fraser is stepping away from federal politics. Sources say Fraser will announce his exit today and leave cabinet in a shuffle that could happen this week. Fraser has represented the riding of Central Nova since 2015, and sources say he is leaving for family reasons. We'll be hearing a lot more about that story as well coming up on World Report. And you can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Well, we're obviously about to talk about the weather, but I want to mention something that's being affected by the weather, and that is that Mountain View School Division has canceled their buses due to poor road conditions. So that's all buses in Mountain View canceled. Also, Brandon School Division is not operating rural buses this morning, and if you need to attend school and you can't get there because of the road conditions, you please just let the school know you can't make it. In addition, there's 3 schools that are closed. It's Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools. All right, here's Abby with our regional forecast.
We're looking at light snow across the province. Right now, Winnipeg, 0 light snow falling outside. That will continue today. We should see about 2 to 4 centimeters accumulation. Breezy conditions will pick up around the noon period, and temperature will drop to around -5 this afternoon. Then tonight, we'll see the snow taper off. In western Manitoba, Brandon is at -4. The region will also be seeing this light snow, which will be whipping around very, very soon, and temperatures dips to around -8. South Central Red River, Pembina Valley region, we're looking at temperatures dipping to around -6 in the afternoon with light snow, chilly day blowing. It's going to feel colder. Up north, Thompson and Churchill, we're seeing that very cold condition in that area where the wind chill is factored in. We're looking at temperatures around -14 at this time, but the wind chill will be feeling like -24, -32 in the region. So you need to take it outside. If you're driving in open areas, look out for the blowing snow.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. But man, is it warm?
It is warm.
Like
True.
in Winnipeg, it's so slushy when you're driving. It was so strange yesterday to be going around town. Made for a decent weekend to get out and do things. So, Corey Funk is here because you're looking at the highways list, I think.
Yeah, well, and I'm looking at Manitoba 511 right now, and pretty much if you're not in Winnipeg, chances are, and if you're on the highway, it's going to be poor conditions all around. Everything's being reported as covered, and particularly in western Manitoba, some poor visibility. If you're kind of anything kind of west of kind of Shiloh, Nanette, Killarney area, it's going to be poor visibility on those highways. Also the highways around Roblin and Russell are closed right now, so Highway 5 pretty much running from Roblin through Russell to Binscarth. Sorry, not Highway 5. Sorry, Highway 83 running from Roblin through Russell down to Binscarth is closed, as well as Highway 5, pretty much right from the Saskatchewan border all the way to Granville, also closed right now because of poor conditions. So heads up there if you're hitting the highways this morning, not ideal. If you see anything going on out there, though, in the city, outside, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, as you've been hearing, Canada Post says mail delivery should restart tomorrow. Now, there's only so much that we know right now, but obviously we have business news, so I want to ask Krista Lee about it. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So let's reiterate the big headline, right?
Yeah, so as you were just hearing there from Heather in the news, on Friday, Labour Minister Steve McKinnon directed the board to order the 55,000 employees back to work. And of course, we know they've been on strike for about a month now. And the board was supposed to order them back to work if a deal wasn't doable before the end of the year. So Canada Post says the Canada Industrial Relations Board determined that negotiations between the Crown Corporation and the union are at an impasse after 2 days of hearings over this past weekend. So Canada Post says it has agreed with the union to implement a 5% wage increase for now, and that's going to be retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expired. And Canada Post says the terms of the existing collective agreements will be extended now until May of next year.
All right, and we have a full interview actually right after we talk about other business stories coming up. I'll just let people know. Let's go to another story. This one's about the latest inflation numbers. So they're set to be released tomorrow. What are we expecting?
Yeah, well, economists expect inflation likely hovered at or a little bit above the Bank of Canada's 2% target in November. And that's after Taylor Swift's Eras Tour swept through Canada, which offered a temporary economic boost. So a 2% reading would be similar to the month before, but some economists see inflation ticking a little bit higher to around 2.1, 2.2%. with other core inflation numbers looking a bit stronger as well. But others believe that inflation slightly cooled to 1.9% as shelter costs have shown some signs of slowing down with interest rate cuts. And while mortgage interest costs were up 15% from a year ago in October, they were actually down from a 30% growth peak in 2023. And going forward, some economists see inflation cooling this month and next with the federal GST holiday that went into action over the weekend. And forecasters are also predicting that energy and food prices remain steady.
And why are some pubs and bars worried they're going to run out of Guinness?
Well, the Irish Stout, of course, has been popular for a long time among many groups like men, but in the past 2 years, it has skyrocketed in popularity, especially among young people and women. So in the summer and early fall, sales of beer actually decreased to 0.5% in the UK, but across the same time period, sales of beer for Diageo, which owns the Guinness brand, went up by 23%. And by the end of October, Guinness was the top-selling beer in the UK by volume. So why is this? Well, social media influencers and marketing campaigns have helped to dispel some of those notions that Guinness is just a drink for older men. Influencers on TikTok have made the beer trendy, and they're showcasing the best pours at pubs across London. And then in March, Diageo rolled out a popular marketing campaign with actor Jason Momoa. And with the sudden increase in demand, Diageo has told some pub owners that it may have to set some allocation limits to ensure distribution can last through the holiday season.
You a Guinness person?
I think I've tasted it, but I don't think I've ever had a full Guinness before. But I was just at a party over the weekend with my friend who's a woman, and she loves the coffee flavor. And she says all of her girlfriends are now drinking Guinness.
It's a meal, as they say. And it's a particular way to pour it, right? Just get that big foamy head on there.
119 seconds for a proper pour, apparently.
Wild. All right, what's going on in the markets this morning?
So in Europe, stocks are lower. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. And Asia markets are reversing their gains. So Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all down. Oil is down 70 cents to $70.59 US per barrel. Gold is up at $12.60 to $2,660.10 US per ounce. And the dollar is down 0.02 of a cent to 70.2 cents US.
All right, thanks, Crystal. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Crystal Ramlicam with Business News. Now, right at the end of our report there, if you watch on YouTube, you saw I was handed a sheet from Heather in the news center. This is because we have more bus cancellations. So I've told you about Mountain View and the rural buses in Brandon. In addition, Alexandria, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools closed. Beautiful Plains School Division not running buses today. Also, buses are canceled, and Colony schools are closed in Rolling River School Division today. And then also due to poor road conditions, Southwest Horizon School Division has closed school today. So that's all of the schools are closed in Southwest Horizon School Division, but staff are assigned to work from home. So that's the latest list of 6:42 a.m. Well, let's get back to this top news. The Canada Post workers have been ordered back to work. Tomorrow is the day. Mark Vigliotti is the editor-in-chief of iPolitics, and I spoke with him for his take on this at 6.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. So I suppose that for a lot of people who are on the side of waiting for mail, they'll be pretty pleased to hear this. So can you walk us again through the details of what's happening?
Yeah, so on Friday, the minister made an order to the Canada Labour Board saying, if you agree with me that negotiations between the union and the Canada Post are are totally deadlocked, and there's no realistic prospect of a breakthrough anytime soon, then you're going to have to order workers, off the picket lines until May. The boards met over the weekend. They held talks. They held hearings with Canada Post and the union, both making submissions, and ultimately late yesterday said, the minister's right. We agree. There's no prospect here, so we're going to order return to work. And Canada Post said, okay, that's great. We're going to rev up operations and start again on Tuesday. How long, until the full rollout comes out, until that massive month-long backlog is worked through, I don't know. But full operations starting Tuesday, according to Canada Post.
So this is all employees that are ordered back to work starting tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. Canada Post has full operations. This order applies to everyone who was on strike up until, I guess now, right?
Yep.
So we're talking tens of thousands of workers who will be back at work come Tuesday.
But as you said, who knows what that'll mean for how quickly the rollout can happen because everything's so backlogged. At the busiest time of the year, one of them. What was the thinking behind the move by the Labour Minister? Why did he decide to send it to the Industrial Relations Board? And then what's the reaction been from Canada Post and the union then?
Yeah, I think the thinking is just to your point, busiest time of the year for not only businesses, but one other group he signaled out was charities. This is a crucial time for them to get donations that fund their work throughout the course of the year. He also talks about the impact on rural and remote communities who can't get access to things like medications because they rely on Canada Post. So he was feeling pressure from all sides. Why he opted to take this route is really interesting. He framed it as a creative solution because if you remember, I guess last month with the ports shutdowns, he ordered an end to the strike, but also to impose binding arbitration. He also did the same thing with the rail lockouts. Why he didn't take more decisive action and just say, we're going to send this to binding arbitration and be done with it, and opting for this essential pause until May, he called it a creative solution. It does seem like maybe he doesn't want to set a precedent that, the government's going to intervene and end any kind of strike activity. I think he wanted to give both sides the benefit of the doubt, give them time to work through their issues, but after a month, it seemed like there was no progress. So it kind of proposes temporary pause to let them work through the holiday season, and then in the spring, see if they can, come to a possible agreement.
Yeah, because they are not settled at all. There is a 5% wage increase that's retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expire, just to reiterate that. Expired, rather, which is about 1 year ago. So there's some movement for the workers, but they're going to have to wait and see what happens next. How much pressure was the federal government under to intervene? I mean, I know that's the interviews that we've been doing in the last couple of weeks have been about that.
Yeah, I mean, immense, to put it lightly, right? I think when you look at the kind of challenges that a postal shutdown has, they're so immense and broad. It's also impacting communities that really, don't have the same kind of options that maybe other communities have. Where maybe broadband isn't as easily accessed. So I think they were facing it from businesses who were struggling with shipments, especially small businesses. I think you were seeing it from, charities. I think you were also seeing a lot of rural remote communities who can rely on that. So the pressure was pretty intense, and it's coming through a real crucial time of the year. Ultimately speaking, I think the minister was also, seeing that there was no progress at the table. So I'm sure he was also feeling from, the people at the table that, something needs to be done. So pressure from really all sides.
Now, you've already been referencing this, and others have as well, but the Labour Ministry talking about this Industrial Inquiry Commission. It's going to be established to find out why negotiations between the parties failed. I want to ask, though, how useful that might be, do you think?
Yeah, so these are usually convened to discuss broad sectoral issues. So not necessarily, going through the fine print of a deal and figuring out whether these negotiating demands are reasonable or if there's some kind of daylight. It's more so, what are the challenges facing the sector? What can we kind of recommend as a structural fix? And this is interesting because, Canada Post is a unique position. I mean, we do have, I guess, a postal sector, if you want to call it that, but it's essentially Canada Post. So I think this is going to be a broader look at the challenges Canada Post is facing, which are, well documented, the rise of internet kind of eating away at some of these, deliveries, and also competition for those parcel deliveries from, things like Amazon. Is this a sustainable financial model? What can be done? Whether or not, things need to be changed in terms of how they approach their workforce, the rise of, the increasing use of contractors. These are all issues I think are going to come at the table. Obviously, there's a direct tie into what's being discussed in negotiations, but I think there's going to be a broader look through this commission.
Those are all the big questions for sure. Thank you very much for this, Marco. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
That's Marco Vigliotti, the editor-in-chief of iPolitics. Now, we have asked you on Facebook this morning, and we'd love it if you call us. Now that the Canada Post workers have been ordered back to work tomorrow, how will that impact you here in Manitoba? So Jackie Harms wrote in, I'm wondering what the point of unions are when government seems to side with corporations regardless of the workers just wanting a decent wage compared to 23 executive positions at 6-digit salaries and bonuses. The gap between rich and poor just keeps widening, she writes. Deborah Bosch says, we live in rural Manitoba. This is an essential service and should be treated as such. Minimal services should be provided by management while on strike. They might even appreciate what the real postal workers do. In the next hour of the program, we're going to talk to someone who lives in Lynn Lake, and we'll get their point of view this morning. They had previously written that they were extremely concerned about the stoppage in service, so we're going to follow this story as it continues to develop. Time right now is 11 minutes to 7 o'clock. And Corey actually is in with our update on the highways now. Hi, Corey.
Hi, yeah, just got a call from Maria who says that on the southbound west perimeter, just before Oak Bluff, there's been a collision in the right-hand lane. Emergency crews are on scene. It looks like there's a couple cars in the ditch. So keep left to get around that. Give those emergency crews their space.
And where's that again?
That is the southbound west perimeter.
Okay.
So heads up there. And just a reminder that the highways just in general this morning are just not great, particularly in western Manitoba and southern Manitoba. Poor visibility, covered highways. The highways around Roblin and Russell are closed right now. Highway 83 from Roblin to Russell, as well as Highway 5 from the Saskatchewan border to Grandview, closed this morning because of poor conditions. So if you see anything else going on up there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
We'll update the list of where buses aren't running, and there are some school closures. That'll be just before the top of the clock. Right now, though, speaking of schools and young people, TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube might not be places where you might spend a lot of time, but of course, teenagers absolutely do. And what they're viewing can be a mix of fact and just straight up lies, frankly, fiction. The Teen Fact Checking Network is a program that's designed to teach teenagers how to spot misinformation. It's run by the media literacy group Media Smarts, and this Monday morning we're going to talk about it. Matthew Johnson is the Director of Education there. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mercy.
So how does this program work?
So this is a program that was started by MediaWise in the United States, which is an initiative of the Poynter Institute. It's since spread to a number of other countries, and so we administer it here in Canada. And how it works is, at the beginning of this last year, we accepted 16 teens ages 13 to 18. We taught them some basic video making and fact-checking skills, and then they went out on their own social media feeds, and they looked for claims that maybe seemed a little suspicious or that seemed too good to be true, and then investigated them. With guidance from us, they made videos where they show what the original claim or video is. They tell you whether or not it is true, whether it's false, or whether there's some important context missing. But most importantly, they show the steps that they took to get there, so that they're really demonstrating how we can verify information online. And then we posted those videos to our own social media and video channels, where they've collectively had more than 2 million views. And now we're recruiting more young people for the second round of videos that are going to be in 2025.
So who should apply? Tell us a little bit about this recruitment process if someone's thinking, oh, I'd love to do that.
Well, really, it could be anyone age 13 to 18. You don't need to know how to make videos. One of the young people in this program, the very first video he had ever made in his life was the video he made for us. You don't need to already know anything about fact-checking. We teach that, and we are with the young people every step of the way in developing the videos. Really, you don't even need to have your own social media account, because we post the videos to our channels. You just need to have curiosity and to be willing to put a few hours a week into fact-checking and making these videos.
And there's a small honorarium that can be anywhere in Canada. Where do people read more about it to apply? I just don't want to miss that detail.
So they can go to our website, mediasmarts.ca, where the application form is.
I don't know if you have an example, Matthew, of what you're talking about. You know, as these teens were in this program, you know, and they were learning to sort fact from fiction. Do you have an example of something that maybe surprised them, where they went, wow, this is a really good example?
You know, they really did a wide range of things. I think one of my favorite ones was a young person who had seen in a number of different places the claim that it was illegal in Ottawa to paint your doors purple. And that one was a little bit of an odyssey. He actually wound up emailing the mayor's office to find out the answer. Sometimes they really were surprised by how the context could change things. Another young person investigated a claim that a housing development was being built in Dubai that was going to be 100 miles long. And when they investigated it, they found out that it was the basic claim was true, but that they had since changed the plan to make it only 10 miles long, which really showed that, you know, the basic facts of something may be true, but when you find out the context, it reads very differently.
What should teens know about how to spot information? Like, what is step one? Obviously, there's a complex, there's a whole bunch of steps, but what is step one? What do you hope they ask themselves?
Well, step one really is leaving the original claim, not trying to trust your gut or trust your eyes, but rather looking for evidence that a claim is true or false outside of that original post. So one of the things that young people tended to do early in the process was that they would spend a lot of time trying to investigate the person who had made the video or the post that they started with. But most of the time, that wasn't the person that the claim was originating from. Usually it was coming second or third hand, and so it was kind of a waste of time to find out whether they are an expert. You want to find out where the claim originally came from and then determine, okay, is that source an expert? Do they have good reason to know? So it's things like going upstream. It's things like using fact-checking tools, doing reverse image searches, and, of course, checking against sources that you know are reliable sources of news or information, or that you know are experts or authorities on a topic.
Thanks for all this, Matthew. One more time, leave us with that website if folks are, teens are wanting to apply.
So that's mediasmarts.ca.
Awesome. Nice to talk with you.
Thank you.
That's Matthew Johnson, Director of Education at Media Smarts, which is a Canadian nonprofit media literacy organization, and mediasmarts.ca if you want to throw your hat in the ring to see if you want to be part of their project, trying to separate fact from fiction on social media sites. It's 4 minutes to 7 o'clock now. We'll turn to Heather and headlines in a moment. Right now, though, I want to read the list of what is canceled in terms of schools and buses because of poor road conditions out there, especially in rural Manitoba. So Southwest Horizon School Division has closed all schools today. Staff are assigned to work from home. Buses are canceled and colony schools are closed in Rolling River School Division. Buses aren't running in Beautiful Plains, but school is on. Mountain View School Division has canceled buses. School closures, if any, have not yet been announced. So right now, school is on. And Brandon School Division won't operate buses outside the city of Brandon this morning. Alexander O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are also closed. So that's where everything is at in terms of to this hour. We'll get into traffic in the city and on the perimeter in a moment because there have been some issues there and there's some highway closures also. Corey's just updating that. Right now, though, at 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, let's find out more about today's top news stories with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, as we've been hearing, Canada Post says mail will start moving again tomorrow. It is good news for small businesses who have been turning to holiday markets to give shoppers a chance to get gifts in person after a month without Canada Post delivery. We'll hear more about the postal situation coming up on World Report at 7. And 3 Manitoba nurses were fined this year after failing to report past convictions for impaired driving. That story as well, and some reaction from a nursing professor at the University of Manitoba. That's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk has actually popped in because he's been on the phone and looking at all the details. What's up with the traffic?
Yeah, so just got a call from Dave. Westbound Highway 1, kind of as you make your way towards Fermor there, just past the East Perimeter. Emergency crews are blocking the entirety of the road right now. So that's, he said, is getting really backed up pretty quickly, about 30, 40 cars right now. But I imagine as traffic picks up, that might be more. So heads up there. That's entirely blocked the westbound Highway 1 when it kind of becomes Fermor there, past the East Perimeter. As well, southbound West Perimeter, right before Oak Bluff as well. There's emergency crews blocking the curb lane because there's been a multi-vehicle collision there as well. Highways closed around Russell and Roblin. Highway 5 from Saskatchewan border to Grandview, as well as Highways 83 between Roblin, Russell through to Binscarth. If you see anything else, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
So we have this light snow falling right now. It's 0 in Winnipeg. It's slushy and strange out there, but more snow is going to come. 2 to 4 centimeters, and it's going to be blowing this afternoon as the winds increase to 40 to 60, gusting from the northwest. Our temperature in Winnipeg today is going to fall to around -5 degrees. Coming up in the next hour of Information Radio, we're going to hear about $1 million investment into a program that pairs caregivers with Manitobans who need one. And it's not home care. This is a different program. Stay tuned. We'll hear about it. Also, thanks to the GST holiday, one Winnipeg business owner says the busiest time of year is now more stressful. We're going to hear more about that. And yes, Canada Post. Can't talk enough about it. It was one of the top stories the last number of weeks, and so the development today, as Heather was mentioning, is huge. We're about to hear more about it on World Report. But we also are going to hear from a Manitoban who lives in Lynn Lake, who says she's been frustrated with this strike because she wants people to recognize Canada Post as an essential service.
You have to close up your borders, and drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in, maybe more importantly.
Despite Donald Trump's concern, there is actually very little fentanyl going from Canada into the United States, but some experts say money laundering and the involvement of organized crime means the threat is real. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. On Tuesday morning, mail will begin moving in this country for the first time in a month. Contract talks between Canada Post and the union hit an impasse this weekend. The Industrial Relations Board says it does not look like a deal will be done by the end of the year. So 55,000 striking workers are being ordered back to work. The CBC's Angie Seth joins me in studio. And Angie, what is the latest?
Well, the latest is December 17th. That's the big day. Tomorrow, on Tuesday, they are going to be heading back to work, those 55,000 workers, this after over 4 weeks of being on the picket lines. And that's coming with the Canadian Industrial Relations Board and the Labour Minister basically coming to an agreement. This is based on that recommendation to say we need to get workers back. We need to get business back up and running. So that's the good side of this thing right now.
So the postal workers will be back on the job, but this is not the end of contract negotiations.
Well, there is no contract. There has been no deal. So at this stage of the game, they will go back. What they will be receiving is that 5% increase that will come into effect going forward. It'll be retroactive to the day after each collective agreement has been expired. So there will be something that the workers will be getting. However, as I said, there's no contract. So things are at an impasse. There's actually a pause in negotiations that are happening right now until May 22nd. Between that time, there will be an industrial inquiry commission that will be conducted by William Kaplan. That's who the Labour Minister has appointed to do so. What will happen at that point then is in May is they will receive a proposal, a recommendation in terms of what a contract could look like. It will go both to Canada Post and the union. They can take it or not. If they don't take it, we are back at the drawing table. If they do, then of course we have a deal. But now we sort of wait for that. We're sort of in limbo on that set of things. But in the meantime, we hold on to December 17th as to at least when some work will be coming back online.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Angie Seth in our Toronto studio. The federal government is about to unveil its long-awaited fall economic statement. The finance minister is signaling there will be some big spending. It is meant to stop Donald Trump from following through on his tariff threat. But as Karina Roman tells us, the deficit could be larger than promised.
We've seen serial slippage in meeting budget targets ever since the worst of the COVID crisis passed.
Economist Jock Finlayson is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute. He predicts a larger than promised deficit in today's fiscal update. In fact, last week, the finance minister would not commit to meeting her $40.1 billion deficit target, committing instead to meet her other promise of a declining debt to GDP ratio, meaning the debt as a proportion of the economy continues to go down.
We're painting the porches and planting the flowers out in the garden in front of the nice little house while the underlying foundations of it are being kind of chewed away by termites.
And there's looming trouble in Canada's vital trade relationship with the United States. President-elect Donald Trump's 25% tariff threat could suck millions in business investment out of Canada. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says that is her central challenge.
We need to be fighting for that capital, fighting for that investment, because that is how we fight for Canadian jobs and Canadian prosperity.
The full details of Ottawa's plan to beef up the border, including possible new legislation and up to $1 billion in new spending, is not expected to be revealed today, although a hint of it might be. But Canadians hoping to see mention of those $250 rebate checks once offered by the government are likely to be disappointed, as no opposition party seems ready to support the measure as it was proposed. Karina Roman, CBC News, Ottawa.
CBC News will have full coverage of the fall economic statement delivered by Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland this afternoon. Join co-host Catherine Cullen in Ottawa and Tom Harrington in Toronto starting at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBC Radio, or you can stream it live on CBC News on the app. Canada's trade relationship with the United States is top of mind for the country's premiers as well. They are meeting today in Mississauga to discuss the 25% tariff threat. But as Kate McKenna tells us, they don't agree on how best to respond.
It's great to have all the premiers here in town.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford welcoming Canada's premiers to a day of meetings in Mississauga, where their main topic of discussion is set to be Donald Trump's promise to impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods.
And obviously the trade deal will be a big discussion here, and everyone working together. Everyone has their different concerns.
Last week, a crack formed in the Premier's United Front. All agree it's all hands on deck to convince the president-elect not to follow through on his tariff threat, but they're divided over what happens if he does.
I think all premiers can get on the same page when it comes to retaliatory measures.
Nope, because I'm not on the same page when it comes to retaliatory measures.
Premier Danielle Smith says she will never support plans to block or slow exports of Alberta energy to the United States. She's focused on promoting Canada's trade relationship to Americans and tightening border security, which is Trump's key request.
Tariffs only hurt Canadian consumers and they only hurt American consumers.
Her comments come after Ford said he'd be willing to stop electricity exports from his province as a worst-case scenario. Ontario exports enough electricity to power 1.5 million homes. Compare that to Alberta, which exported over $125 billion in energy products last year alone.
If I was in Premier Smith's shoes, I'd probably be saying the same thing. But this is the reason we get together.
At the end of the Premier's meeting, they issue a joint statement outlining their priorities. But it's based on consensus, and there's a big gulf between some premiers on the subject of retaliatory measures. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
People pick through piles of debris on the French island territory of Mayotte. Hundreds, possibly thousands, are feared dead after Cyclone Chido hit the Indian Ocean islands over the weekend. Many of the people on Mayotte were already living in makeshift houses and slums. Now they have no homes, no food, and no clean drinking water. Eric Samva is with the French Red Cross.
We have shelter toolkits and tarpaulins for the construction of shelters. We have also jerry cans, buckets, soaps to make sure that there is proper use of water. We have water treatment units also that are ready to be deployed to provide drinking water to the population.
Chido is being called the worst cyclone to hit the Indian Ocean islands in nearly 100 years. A confidence vote is being held today in Germany's parliament. Chancellor Olaf Scholz called a vote despite his government's growing unpopularity. His coalition fell apart last month in a dispute over the country's stagnant economy. Today's vote is expected to pave the way for early elections in February. Freelance reporter Abby Kodassen has more from Berlin.
This is not where German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wanted to be before Christmas. When his three-party coalition government collapsed last month, Scholz was looking to buy time and delay a vote of confidence on his leadership in Parliament, says Josef Janning, a senior associate fellow at the German Council on Foreign Relations.
And the date he was proposing actually is the 15th of January.
But the opposition, the Conservatives, were not having that. Their leader, Friedrich Merz, has a double-digit lead in the polls.
That doesn't mean that Merz would be chancellor right away, because he would be needing to form a coalition first.
Still, Merz is playing the part, even outside Germany, on a recent trip to Kyiv to meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Merz accused Scholz of refusing to send more powerful missiles to Ukraine and forcing Kyiv to fight with one hand behind its back. But he himself hasn't guaranteed he'll give the green light for such a step. Though most Germans agree with Scholz's decision not to provide Taurus missiles, the chancellor remains deeply unpopular. Expecting to lose the vote of confidence, Scholz has already set an early election date for February 23rd.
There will be by no means a quick establishment of a new government.
Perhaps not until early spring. Meanwhile, the other top European power, France, is dealing with its own domestic turmoil. And even more turmoil is likely with Donald Trump returning to the White House. Abby Kodassen, CBC News, Berlin.
Zakir Hussain, one of India's most accomplished classical musicians, has died. Hussein played tabla. The pair of hand drums is the main percussion instrument in Indian classical music. Hussein brought tabla to global audiences. He collaborated with Beatles guitarist George Harrison, Grateful Dead drummer Mickey Hart, and classical cellist Yo-Yo Ma. His family says Hussein died from a chronic lung disease at a hospital yesterday in San Francisco. Zakir Hussain was 73. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
So the mail's going to get moving. We'll talk more about that this hour from a Manitoba point of view. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio here on CBC this Monday morning on 89.3. Also could be on 990 AM on the app or YouTube, wherever you're joining us. Thank you for doing that. Issues. I mean, it's slushy in Winnipeg, but out on the highways and in rural areas, conditions are really challenging. So Corey will tell us about that in a moment. We'll also have a list of some school closures and bus cancellations, so stay tuned for that. In Winnipeg, though, really quite mild this morning. We've been the warm spot, and we still are right now, sitting at 0. Well, this hour on the program, we're going to talk about the GST holiday from a Winnipeg business owner's point of view. Of course, that just kicked in on Saturday morning. Also, with Canada Post workers being ordered back to work tomorrow, we're going to hear from a resident in Lynn Lake who says she's been frustrated with the strike, but mostly because she hopes people recognize Canada Post is, in her view, an essential service. So we're going to hear more about that. Plus, as I mentioned, you've been writing to us as we asked you how this return to work order is going to be affecting your life in Manitoba. So we'll hear more of your comments as well. Heather Wells has a little more detail on this story and more in her news headlines this morning. Hi there.
Good morning. Yes. One moment, please. Canada Post is going to be moving again, the mail service resuming tomorrow, which is good news for small businesses who have been relying on holiday markets as a way to get their products out there. And a Manitoba vasectomy provider, Dr. Errol Billenkoff, says every day more young, childless men are walking in asking for vasectomies. We'll hear why he thinks this is happening in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get to what's happening in the weather forecast. Abby?
Yeah, light snow, breezy conditions expected throughout the day across board, and we'll see temperatures gradually dropping. Currently, Winnipeg, we're still at 0, light snow falling outside. The forecast calls for snow today, 2 to 4 centimeters expected once the system blows by, and that blowing snow will be developing once we get close to the noon period. We saw some fog patches earlier at the airport. That is clearing up already, but the winds will be picking up later, becoming breezy as we get closer to the noon period. And then we see temperatures drop to around -5 later in the day. Similar snowy and breezy conditions we're seeing in western Manitoba, much of the south central regions. The winds already picking up. That northwest winds already picking up and gusting all the way to 40 kilometers. You should be feeling that on open roads and open areas this morning. And then if we look further north, it's more harsh with chills and snow. But for Winnipeg today, we're just expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of snow accumulation. It's still mild outside, but it's going to get breezy later.
It's weird outside.
I know. Like,
right?
I stepped out this morning and I'm like, should I take my jacket or not?
I know. And you want to take your jacket because of all these changes that are coming. And maybe you need rubber boots or winter boots or I don't know.
It's
all
slushy.
the boots.
You need like rubber boots because
Yeah.
it's just going to filter into your shoes.
Yeah, so Winnipeg's really mild. Now, this is causing issue on the highways, as we mentioned, and for schools. So school closures now, here's your list to 7:13. Roblin and Grandview schools are closed. Schools in Roblin and Grandview are closed due to road closures. All other Mountain View School Division schools are open, but buses are canceled all throughout that Mountain View division. Also, due to poor road conditions, all Southwest Horizon School Division schools are closed today, but staff are working from home. Buses are canceled and Colony schools are closed in Rolling River School Division, and all other schools remain open today. And buses are not running in Beautiful Plains. All other schools are opened. In addition, at Cole St. Lazare School is closed. That's in DSFM. And Brandon School Division, buses won't operate outside the city of Brandon. Also, Alexander, O'Kelly, and Spring Valley schools are closed. I'm smiling because we're on YouTube. And so if you're on YouTube, you've been seeing a split screen while I'm doing the closures, and you're seeing Corey practicing what he's about to deliver.
I'm just trying
your,
to...
your hands going up and down
Yeah.
trying to make sense because you have so much information in front of you.
There is a lot. And I'm going to start with those highway closures. You're talking about the school closures around there too. That's because Highway 83 from around, this is my hand motion here, from Silverwood down to Roblin through Russell to Binscarth closed right now. And then also Highway 5, so from the Saskatchewan border through to Roblin to Grandview, also closed right now because of poor conditions. And essentially, if you live in Manitoba and you're hitting the highways today, expect poor conditions all around. Poor visibility and snow-covered highways. Heard from Keith, who kind of makes his way, commuter Keith he calls himself. He makes his way from Glenborough to Brandon every day. He says Highway 2, Highway 10, super snow-covered. He's going around 80. Sometimes has to slow down to 40 as well. So just heads up there. As well, heard from Maria, the southbound west perimeter, just before Oak Bluff. In the right-hand lane, there's been a collision, some few cars in the ditch. There's been emergency crews. Heard from her about half an hour ago, so may still be issues there. As well, westbound, the Highway 1 going westbound, just past the east perimeter there before it kind of becomes Furmore. There's been some sort of incident there where there are emergency vehicles, heard from Dave, blocking the entirety of the road. So when I talked to him about 20 minutes ago, there's about 30, 40 cars. I imagine if that's still blocked, might be even further now. So you may want to find another way to get into the city if you're coming in on the number 1 from the east this morning. If you see anything else though going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Drive safe out there, 204-788-3093.
So 7:16 is the time, and let's start this half hour with some good news. If you or maybe someone you love need some kind of support at home, some type of care at home, you likely know it can be a challenge to find the right person to offer the right kind of support. Well, your search might get a little easier because there's hope at least that the team who run Care Possible, which is a nonprofit online marketplace that pairs caregivers with Manitobans who need one, they're getting some help. Care Possible was just awarded $1.2 million to keep doing the work they do for as long as possible. The program is run through Manitoba Possible. So that's an advocacy agency for people who live with disabilities. And Lindsay Cook is the CEO of Manitoba Possible and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So to call this good news, I guess, is probably a bit of an understatement. How big of a deal is this?
I mean, it's life-changing for us. We've been working on this deal for probably 3 years, and it's really going to give us the runway we need to do the kind of work that we know is ahead of us. So we're really excited.
So just so people, we should outline first, just so people can understand, what kind of work does Care Possible do?
Yeah, so Care Possible is, as you said, an online platform that pairs together people who need home care or respite or any other kind of care support with independent care providers right in their neighborhood. It's exciting. We've got about 1,000 verified care providers across the province, and we're making matches every day.
So the Manitobans who access Care Possible would be across the board, I guess?
Yeah, that's it. So we really designed it to be as applicable to as many Manitobans as we can. That can be from anything from your traditional home care, personal care, to respite, to we see a lot of work in companionship, just combating loneliness across the province.
What does this gift can allow you to do?
Yeah, so this is a social financing agreement, and we're structured as a nonprofit. And so when we looked at the startup costs ahead of us, it turns out tech-based solutions are kind of expensive to get off the ground. And because we're a nonprofit, we didn't have equity that we could sell to potential investors. So this is a new tool that's just getting off the ground across Canada, where this gives us the capital upfront to cover some of our startup costs until we can get to a point of sustainability. So it really just makes sure we're going to see this for years to come for Manitobans who need this support.
Why is the support needed? The service to sort of match people with what match people with the care that they need.
Yeah. So, my mentors tell me this was the number one concern 30 years ago, and it tends to come up as the number one concern today, too. People rely on these services for their independence, for their dignity, to age in place, to thrive as families, and they have always really struggled to be able to find a reliable care provider. And so this is just one solution that's going to contribute to that. I like to say that, we've got a lot of issues facing Manitoba right now, and we really need an all-hands on deck. So there's a role for government, there's a role for nonprofit and charity. This is a new tool called social finance that I think is really going to allow us to tackle some of those longstanding problems in our province.
Social finance. Mm-hmm. So you're referring to sort of the group that put the money up. So the $1.2 million investment. Can you tell us a little bit about the group that gave the money?
For sure. So this is a partnership between Victoria Hospital Foundation and Boan Social Impact. Boan Social Impact received some upfront money from the Government of Canada Canada to really get social finance off the ground across the country. And so it was a partnership between those two organizations that is going to give us this capital that we can then use to get off the ground and make Care Possible sustainable and really invest in the supports that we need moving ahead.
What does social finance mean in the bigger point of view? You're saying that this is sort of really, the steps are being taken now that are sorely needed in this area.
Yeah, so social finance is where the lender has an equal interest and priority on social impact than they do on financial return. So it's not one or the other, but it's both working in partnership. So we found in this agreement lenders who were equally as concerned about us making the difference that we wanted to make as they were to the financial return. One of my board members referred to it as patient capital. So better than commercial terms, that has a long repayment window and really works with us as a nonprofit.
What would the burdens be, Lindsay, if somebody on their own is going out? Or what could some of the potential burdens or challenges, rather, barriers, challenges be to someone trying to access, the care themselves in the system?
Yeah, so I guess some of the benefits that we offer is that we have a liability insurance plan. We do all of the verifications, criminal record check, child abuse registry check, adult abuse registry check. We provide a care academy, we call it, which is some professional development for all of our care providers. And you can log in, create a profile, and instantly have access to a community of people right in your neighborhood who are looking for work in this area. So it really removes, we think, almost all of the barriers that people have to self-managed care.
You've been talking about, the goal is also to get the word out more that Care Possible's there, to help people. So if someone's listening and they need support, what's the first thing they should do? Is it the website or social pages? Where would you direct them?
Yeah, any of the above. carepossible.ca. We've made it as user-friendly as possible, so it should walk you right through the process. But we know we're also in the human services too, right? So we do have a team at the office. The phone number would be on the website. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's real people there working in our office here in Winnipeg that will walk you through the process as well.
All right. Thank you very much for coming in this morning, and congratulations on this gift.
Thanks. We're so excited.
That's Lindsay Cook, CEO of Manitoba Possible. So carepossible.ca is the website where you can learn more information and details about the work that they do.
The customer you have reached,
Radio Noon,
is not available. Please leave your message at the tone.
Hello, this is Santa Claus. Just calling you back to say that I talked to the elves, and yes, they will let me take some calls from the good girls and boys of Manitoba on Radio Noon Christmas Eve from 12:30 to 1 p.m. Looking forward to it, so please don't hold any calls.
Santa Claus is coming to Radio Noon Christmas Eve from 12:30 to 1. Get those questions and Christmas wishes ready and dial 204-780-0893 for your chance to talk to Santa.
And Corey Funk's going to get to host that show next Tuesday.
I'm so excited
Christmas
to meet Santa.
Eve,
He's so
Santa.
nice. Yeah, it'd be fun.
You better be good between now and then.
Call in.
Corey is here to do a traffic update.
Yes, just got a call from Julie and Carol. So the lights at Redwood and Main are completely out right now. Police are directing traffic. So Carol says things are running fairly smoothly, but she says it appears that westbound Redwood is actually blocked right now. So heads up there, might be slow going through there, but it does seem like things are more or less flowing as police direct traffic through Redwood and Main. I'll have more of a highway update, but just be careful if you're hitting the highways. Highways around Roblin and Russell are closed right now. Let me know if you're seeing anything else. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, we're just hearing from Santa Claus, and our friends at CBC Music described Tim Baker's new holiday album like a full-body hug in record form. Maybe we need that this Monday morning. It's called Full Rainbow of Light. And from it, this is Tim Baker with Light the Light.
Happiness to all my friends and to all I haven't met. It's not the Christmas that we dreamt, and it isn't over yet. Yeah, all my records and my decorations are second-hand anthems. All of the presents that I wanted to get you, well, there wasn't much to wrap. But I ain't just talking, I don't care what you bought.
bake cookies now and turn this up in my kitchen. Light the light, Tim Baker. Hi, Scott Ricker. How you doing?
Don't speak to me about baking cookies. I was up way too late last night trying to do that, trying to jam these things in. But that music would have helped. That's
right?
for sure.
It's fun. What kind of cookies were you baking? What were you baking?
My mom's Viennese almond crescents made last night, and I actually made her gumdrop cake as well. So it was a busy baking night.
I like that. Yeah, my husband has, this sounds like it's a terrible name for a cookie, boiled raisin cookies. They don't sound that appetizing, but they're my husband's fave, and I try to recreate his mom's recipe now that she's not with us. So it's very important. Very important. Yeah.
Very, very important.
It's the time of year. If people want this album, by the way, check it out. Tim Baker. Light the light.
Mm-hmm.
Big finish. Let's get into sports now and start with swimming, where Canada's golden generation continues to shine.
Yeah, does it ever? The country, Marcy, finished with 15 medals at this week's World Short Course Championships. So that ties its best ever performance at this meet. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, Summer McIntosh led the way. The Toronto team claimed 5 medals in Budapest, including a silver yesterday in the 200-meter backstroke. Now, this is a discipline Summer's just added to her repertoire, so you'd think she'd be thrilled that she set a new world junior record in it. Well, think again.
Honestly, I'm kind of disappointed with that. I really wanted to get gold for Canada tonight, but, I mean, this is just a great motivator for next time I'm training and I'm hurting, and I just remember things like this and remember what it feels like to get silver, so it always keeps me pushing forward. But overall, pretty good way to start off, kind of restarting up 200 backstroke as an event.
The words of a perfectionist there. One who claimed 4 medals at the Paris Olympics this summer, the greatest individual performance ever by a Canadian. And that is why Summer won the Northern Star Award as this country's top athlete of the year this week, or last week. And it's also why Summer was named yesterday World Aquatics Female Athlete of the Year. No Canadian swimmer, male or female, has ever earned that honor before. So she just continues to make history at the age of 18. Incredible.
Amazing. Let's go to hockey and the latest from the WHL.
Yeah, the Brandon Wheat Kings, obviously the only team in the league based in Manitoba these days, beat Saskatoon yesterday 4-2. Defenseman Luke Shipley finding the back of the net a couple of times in the third period to secure that victory. So the Wheat Kings, a couple games above 500. They're in 6th place in their conference right now and have one final game before the holiday break, that being Tuesday at home to the Moose Jaw Warriors. If the NHL is more your thing, the Jets, pretty impressive, beating Patrick Laine and the Habs over the weekend. Laine, the former Jet, 7 shots on Connor Hellebuck, who stonewalled the Big Fin. The Jets next play tomorrow when they take on the lowly, touch wood as I say that,
Yeah, do it.
San Jose Sharks. Yeah.
Not taking anything for granted, game to game. And let's finish with golf. Canadians excelled this weekend in one of the sport's more unique tournaments. I like this one.
Yeah, the Grant Thornton Invitational. This format involves 2-person teams with one player from the LPGA, the other from the PGA. Canadians Brooke Henderson and Corey Connors nearly won the inaugural event last year, Marcy, falling by a single stroke. And this weekend they were pretty good, too. They finished in 4th place. Connors says he'd love to see this format adopted at the next Summer Games in Los Angeles.
I think it would bring, something really exciting to the Olympics. Obviously, maybe biased because we've got such a talented female player from Canada and Brooke. It would be a thrill to play alongside her on that stage as well. But I think some sort of mixed event would definitely be really exciting, and I'd love to be a part of it.
Golf's world governing body has applied to the IOC to get a mixed gender event included in the LA Games, and I like their chances. After all, this summer's games in Paris had a record 20 mixed gender events, and the IOC has committed to gender equality going forward. The boiled raisin cookies, are the cookies boiled or are the raisins boiled and then put in the cookie?
100% the latter. Yeah, they puff up when you boil them. That's why it's called that. They're kind of like a cinnamony, raisin, walnutty, soft.
That sounds good. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I have a bite and I feel JP's mom still giving me a hug.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah, I got him wrong one year and you should have seen his face. I didn't change him on purpose. I'm sorry. All right, take care, Scott. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Yep.
When we'll learn more about gumdrop cake. It is time now for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, still 0 out there. A little bit of light snow falling, and it'll keep falling through the day, 2 to 4 centimeters. That snow is going to blow around this afternoon as well as the wind starts to pick up around noon today. Our temperature falling to -5 this afternoon. 2 Winnipeg high schools are closed today because of threats. CBC's Megan Ketchison joins us live now with details. Megan?
Well, I just got off the phone with Matt Henderson with the Winnipeg School Division. He says last night, Elmwood High School in the Winnipeg Division and Oak Park in the Pembina Trail School Division received email threats. He wouldn't say the nature of the threats, but said in an abundance of caution, they're not holding classes today and both schools are closed. Police are expected to be at those schools later today. This also affects the daycare that's in Elmwood High School as well. So Henderson says a lot of people are having to scramble to find alternate arrangements. He says they take these kinds of threats very seriously. Henderson says they will inform parents later today about what will happen going forward. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. A Winnipeg vasectomy doctor is noticing a new trend. Dr. Errol Billenkoff says every day more young childless men come in asking for vasectomies.
When I started in practice, it was very uncommon for any young person to come in and want a vasectomy when they had no children, and now it's become pretty much a daily occurrence.
Billenkoff says it's not just here, but colleagues around the world say they too are noticing the same thing. He thinks the cost of living crisis and a mental health crisis are major reasons. He says a lot of people think they don't have what it takes to raise a child. You can hear more on this story right here on Information Radio following the World Report at 8 o'clock. Thousands of Canada Post workers have been ordered back to work tomorrow after a month on the picket lines. At the direction of the federal Labour Minister, the Canada Industrial Relations Board held hearings over the weekend to see if a deal might soon be reached between the Crown Corporation and the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. Last night, Canada Post announced the Labour Tribunal declared an impasse, ordering union members back to work. The contracts have been extended until May to allow the bargaining process to resume, and the Post Office has agreed to implement a retroactive wage increase of 5%. 3 Manitoba nurses were punished earlier this year for not reporting past convictions for impaired driving. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba discovered the convictions in annual targeted background checks. The nurses, 2 of them who pleaded guilty to professional misconduct, were ordered to pay more than $10,000 each. Another was censured and fined $1,000. Sonia Udod is a nursing professor at the University of Manitoba. She says the move could spark fear.
They're trying to do their part by using registration as a tool to protect the public, which is great, but people are afraid of losing their jobs. That's why they are putting in false registration information.
The college says it is working to require regular background checks. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland presents a new fall economic update today.
When we table the fall economic statement on Monday, the debt to GDP ratio for 23-24, which we put forward in the 24 budget, will be met.
But some expect the Trudeau Liberal government will break its promise to keep the federal deficit capped at $40 billion. The parliamentary budget officer projects the deficit will be closer to $47 billion. CBC News has learned federal housing minister Sean Fraser will announce today he won't seek re-election in his Nova Scotia riding and will leave the federal cabinet during the next shuffle, which could come this Wednesday. There are rumors the Prime Minister and his senior advisors are trying to convince former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney to join the cabinet. Liberal sources tell CBC News Carney is more open to the idea than he was in the past, but it is still not a done deal. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. And after more than 4 weeks without Canada Post's mail service, holiday markets have become even more important for small business owners. Sheila Lee and her husband print their art and sell it on things like clothing items and tote bags. Lee says they rely heavily on Canada Post because using other couriers is too expensive. A market yesterday at the Centennial Concert Hall gave them a chance to make their holiday sales.
It's very important to be here because now we can showcase all our products, and this is our only chance to sell to them.
And as we've been hearing, Canada Post workers will be back on the job tomorrow. You can find more news updated throughout the day and the latest about the school closures because of an email threat at Elmwood High and Oak Park High Schools. Just check our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, obviously, Elmwood High School and Oak Park High School being closed is independent of what I'm about to announce. But we have some other school closures because of the weather. And we also have bus cancellations. So I'm going to do that list right now, and then we'll get into the forecast and the commute. So schools in Roblin and Grandview were closed. That's because of road conditions. Other Mountain View School Division schools, though, are open. But all buses are canceled throughout that division. That's Mountain View. Also, Southwest Horizon School Division, schools closed entirely. Staff are assigned to work from home there. Buses are canceled and colony schools are closed in the Rolling River School Division. All other schools are open today, though. Buses aren't running in Beautiful Plains School Division, but school is open as well. École Saint Lazare School is closed. That's in the DSFM. And then finally, Brandon School Division isn't operating rural buses, and Alexandra O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are closed. So let's have a look at the forecast. You might be waking up in Winnipeg thinking, oh, it's warm and kind of slushy out there, but obviously different conditions outside of Winnipeg, Abby.
Yes, the forecast for today across board, we're looking at light snow, and that northwest winds will be felt throughout the day, with temperatures gradually dropping. For Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region, we're looking at temperatures right now around 0 with light snow falling, and this will continue throughout the day. We should see about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow with that breezy conditions for this part of the province picking up around the noon period, and then temperatures will begin to drop to about -5 later in the afternoon. Tonight the snow will ease off, and then we'll see a low of -12. In western Manitoba, it's currently -4 in Brandon, also seeing light snow at this time. That northwest winds will be picking up, and temperatures will fall to -8 this afternoon. In the south central region and the Pembina Valley regions, we're looking at current temperatures around -3. The snow is already picking up and blowing at this time. Temperatures will dip to -6 this afternoon. For the Parkland region, Dauphin sitting at -5 at this time with light snow. That should also pick up, whipping around later in the day. Temperatures will fall to -8. The Interlake region, Gimli sitting at -1 at this time, seeing that light snow, which will continue for most of the day. Temperatures will drop to around -5 this afternoon. And then we head to the Pan Flin Flon. We're looking at temperatures around -12 at this time. Light snow also being felt. We're also seeing that light winds whipping around. Temperatures will stay around -12 for most of the day. Up north, we're seeing Thompson and Churchill with light snow in Thompson and ice crystals in Churchill. Thompson at -14, Churchill at -21. The wind chill makes it feel like -24 and -32 for that region. So there's a risk of frostbite in play today. You just want to take care. But for Winnipeg today, we're looking at about 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, which will be blowing around in the afternoon period in open areas into the evening. And then we'll see temperatures fall to -5 this afternoon.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, take a big breath and tell us what's happening out
lots
there.
going on this morning. I'm going to start with some highway closures, as you heard from the school closures around Roblin, Russell. So the Highway 83 that starts in Silverwood, right down through Roblin, through Russell, down to Binscarth, closed, as well as Highway 5 from the Saskatchewan border to Grandview, closed as well. Those are the highways that are closed, but highways pretty much everywhere else in the province are being reported as covered with poor visibility. So heard from Keith, who drives from Glenborough to Brandon every day. He just said he's going real slow to just make up for just how snowy the highways are this morning. Keep an eye out if you are on westbound Highway 1 heading into the city from heading where you pass the east perimeter going towards where it becomes Fermor. Dave said there was a collision there earlier. Emergency crews are on scene, and they are blocking the entirety of the road. So if you're coming into Winnipeg from the east this morning on Highway 1, you may see some big backups this morning. I would love to get an update on that. Heard about that about half an hour ago. As well, Maria, also about 45 minutes or so ago, she called. She said that the west Perimeter, the southbound West Perimeter, just before Oak Bluff. Emergency crews are in the right-hand lane attending to a multi-vehicle collision. She saw some cars in the ditch there, so keep left to get around that. And one final thing here in the city, lights are out at Redwood and Main this morning. Police are on scene directing traffic. Carol says that the westbound Redwood there appears to be blocked entirely, so just heads up there. Otherwise, traffic was running fairly smoothly because police are on scene directing traffic. If you see anything else going on out there, just be careful on the highways, but give me an update. I'd love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
Usually you write a little summary for me to slide in between times you're in, but I think you're going to have to... No, not that. I think you're going to just have to keep coming in with this list. It's so busy.
Yeah, it's very busy out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Take it easy, as Corey said, for sure. 7:41 a.m. is the time right now. Now, speaking of perimeteritis, sometimes that happens in traffic, right? We're like, oh, it's great in Winnipeg, and then it's all crazy out in rural areas or outside the perimeter. We've also been accused of perimeteritis on the Canada Post story, and talking about how it's maybe not... maybe seen through a certain lens in terms of its impact if you're in an urban area like Winnipeg. But in some of the rural areas, it is an essential service, and that is coming directly from a guest we're going to talk to at 10 to 8 this morning. She lives in Lynn Lake, so obviously northern Manitoba, and she's going to talk about what it's been like without Canada Post, and obviously we'll get her reaction to the news now that workers will be back tomorrow. So that's coming up still ahead this half hour on the show. Well, the other thing that is impacting people just started this weekend, talking about the 2-month GST holiday. It officially began on Saturday. One Winnipeg business owner says the Liberal government's tax break is the furthest thing, though, from a holiday. It's a reminder here, though, before we hear from them, here's a reminder of how it works. So until February 15th, started Saturday, now till February 15th, shoppers will not have to pay GST on items like kids' toys, books, and groceries. Now, consumers don't have to do anything themselves. It is up to the store or the restaurant to know which items are tax-free, and it's actually quite complicated when you break it down. This is something that Toad Hall Toys owner Kari England says has been frustrating. CBC's Gavin Axelrod visited Kari at the store to learn more.
What kind of headaches has this whole thing given you as a business owner?
It's another layer of yuck and stress on top of other layers of yuck and stress, like Canada Post, finding new ways to pay people, having to do 5 extra steps in order to do that. In this was just something I didn't need at this time of year, and I'm also not going to need it on Valentine's Day when I get to change it back. I can only speak to myself and my business, so for me, it's inconvenient, something I wish I hadn't had to deal with. If it helps others, I'm glad. But from my point of view, I wish they hadn't.
In the lead up to all this, what kind of things did you have to change in your systems here?
400 individual tax codes, because all of my items are put in a category, so each category has a designation of a tax code. So it's one after one after one after one that you have to change. Let's just say I made it work. Because there wasn't just changing the tax codes. I also had to take a look at everything that people have put on hold in our system and manually change those taxes because they were put on hold before the tax holiday.
How many hours of preparation would you say it took you to get ready?
Mentally, pretty much as soon as we knew, because then we had to sort out what qualifies, what doesn't qualify, how do I do this, what are the ramifications, how am I going to train my staff and deal with things like returns. I had somebody return 2 items that they were unsure about. They had purchased them 2 days ago. Well, they were charged the taxes. But we're just on, autopilot right now. Run people, give them your money back if you need it, or sell them something. But I said, whoa, stop, guys. Did they pay the tax? Yes. Oh, shoot. So now you have to manually change that for that individual transaction because you don't want to change it on the back end. You have to change it on the front end now. So there are so many different layers of things to think about for all of us.
And so, business-wise, do you think this will have a big impact on things, or is it sort of the holiday season and it's just a coincidence that this is happening now?
I think the latter. I don't think this is really in the forefront of people's minds. It reminds me of, you can save 4 cents on gas per liter, and when you think about it, it's about $2.25. So it's not going to make or break anybody that I can see at this moment. I think it might count more for groceries and for perhaps being able to put something extra on the table or add something to a food bank. So I think that's where people might see a bit of much more of a difference than here.
Corey England's the owner of Toad Hall Toys. Now, P&P Games manager Ev Legree agrees with Corey that the GST holiday has not been a walk in the park, but he welcomes it and all the customers, he says, that he hopes it will bring to his store. He explained that to Gavin Axelrod and also how his store is prepared.
What was it like in the lead up for you guys?
I would describe it as conspicuously slow. From my perspective, people were very much waiting for the break to come into effect before doing any major Christmas purchases. We got a lot of questions about it, but it was still quite slow on the whole. I wish we were given a little more notice ahead of time, because it seems this whole tax break was kind of dropped on retailers with rather short notice and no real confirmation until, day and date it happened. But no, I can appreciate a tax break. I just wish retailers had a little more notice ahead of time.
Did that cause any challenges for you guys here, that the little notice?
It definitely caused some stress. Challenges is a bit extreme, especially because we weren't like the ones handling the discounts on the back end or our point of sale system. But yeah, we definitely had to. We're definitely having to deal with it today.
How busy has it been here today?
Considerably. Similar amounts to Black Friday or other major retail sales days.
Why do you think it's been so? Why do you think today, the first day of the holiday, people are wanting to come on in here?
I think people were waiting for the tax break. It was kind of up in the air as to whether or not it would even pass in the first place. And now that it's confirmed and now that it's here, people are doing at least part of their Christmas shopping.
And so what kind of items that you guys sell here are exempt from the tax?
The major exemptions are physical games, so games with discs or cartridges, and game systems. There are some other items in place, but those are the main ones that people are coming for, and the main Christmas gifts.
And I know digital games aren't exempt. So what do you think the incentive is for people to come in and buy hard copy?
Well, hard copy always has. There's always customer base. Or there's always customers for hard copies of games. Collectors, people just like having physical media in general. There was already the incentive before the tax break. I think this is just kind of a further incentive, more of a win-win.
Businesses we've talked to, they said oh, this is a total headache for us. But it seems for you guys, it's almost the opposite.
Yeah, at least implementation-wise, we don't have to take any extra steps. We just basically have to deal with the rush, the busyness. But there's the main headaches are muscle memory of a game of a certain price comes up to X amount after tax. We have to correct ourselves on that, and we just have to deal with more customers coming in.
One thing I was wondering as well is, I know you talked about it before, but what's it like, I guess, right now that you're having a day as busy as Black Friday?
It's a lot. I'd be lying if I said it wasn't stressful, but it makes the day go by fast. I can't complain.
So this is going to go on until February. I know it's probably a big time because of Christmas, but do you see this kind of busyness extending past Christmas?
I think we're definitely going to see higher than average traffic in January and the first few weeks of February. But I definitely don't anticipate it being as busy as it is now.
Ev Legree, manager of P&P Games here in Winnipeg. The GST holiday runs until February 15th. He was in conversation there with Gavin Axelrod.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
Well, coming up after 8 o'clock, you might have heard this a bit in the news. As we continue our series on the declining birth rate in this country, we're going to hear why more childless men here in Manitoba are getting vasectomies. And it's a trend, actually, that's happening across the country. Do you know who found out about this story? Our own Corey Funk. So he's going to find out where he heard about it, how he found it, and then also his report. That's all coming up after 8 o'clock here on the show. The show is Information Radio, morning show on CBC. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. 0 in Winnipeg. Light snow falling, 2 to 4 centimeters expected. The the high is going to fall to -5 today. And our winds are going to be gusty this morning, northwest 20 gusting to 60 kilometers an hour by the time we get to the noon hour. We have issues with schools. So first of all, we have Elmwood High School and Oak Park High School closed due to threats. We have very limited information on this, but our news department will update everything that we have coming up just before the clock. Also, we have some school and bus cancellations. I'll read the full list just before 8 o'clock as well, so stay with us. We do have an update in traffic. Both Michelle and Dennis called. Westbound Highway 1, before it becomes Fermor, was blocked entirely, but now there's a lane open. Dennis says, though, it's still backed up all the way to the east perimeter. Traffic moving, but very slowly through that area. Well, right now it's 9 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. And as you've been hearing in the news, if you've been up early already this morning, then you've heard that the federal government has now ordered Canada Post workers back to work tomorrow. Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon directed the Industrial Relations Board to step in to get the 55,000 employees back on the job. Now, this strike has been going on for about a month, and it's been hitting some people really hard, specifically those who live outside of Winnipeg. Vicki Phillips is on Zoom with us this morning. Vicki's a registered nurse and a counsellor in Lynn Lake. Hi there.
Hi, how are you, Marcy?
I'm well. So tell me what your initial feeling is hearing that, tomorrow, the workers will have been ordered back, but really from the point of view of folks, things are going to be moving with the mail service.
Well, obviously a lot of relief. There's been a lot of anxiety here in the community, specifically around the fact that people can't get their essential medications. The town is unable to get out essential things such as water samples for the water supply. So there's a lot of things that are causing a lot of anxiety for people in that regards. Not one person in our community has said anything about, oh no, I'm not going to get my presents for Christmas. That's for sure.
It's interesting because part of the conversation has been about the labor negotiation, which obviously isn't settled because they've been ordered back to work. But the bigger picture discussion has turned to whether or not Canada Post is an essential service in 2024. What's your point of view on that?
It was considered an essential service in 2020 when we had the pandemic. So I am not clear why they reversed that decision. I mean, just because people can get out, not all of us can get to the city. I think that they weren't considering the bigger picture of those of us that do not live within the city and those of us that do not have the services that others have the privilege to have. I think about banks. I think about, like I said, anything to do with running a hospital, the blood supplies, getting samples back and forth, everything that we have in our community, we rely on Canada Post for.
I want to reiterate your point here because we asked listeners this morning, now that there's some movement in this, workers being ordered back, how it will impact their lives in Manitoba. So to further what you just said there, Louise Bulow-Smith wrote in and said, ironic that there was a medical columnist on this morning discussing the positive impact of cancer screening that doesn't need involvement of a family MD strap system, which was our column last hour. But she wrote this morning and said, those same screening programs need the mail. Colon cancer tests are sent to the patient and they're back to the lab then by mail. And reminder notices for mammograms and pap tests are sent by mail. So she wrote, Louise, that Canada Post, those important individuals, provide those services. They are needed and are essential in her view. How concerned are you that, as we move forward, some of the discussion might be about changing this service in Canada?
It's a lot of concern because it seems like it's following the same line that, say, transportation did back in the day when the federal government dropped all airports and made it the responsibility of local municipalities. They seem to be dropping a lot of those things. And when you look into it, the federal government actually doesn't use any of our tax money to ensure that these essential things or services actually continue to work. They're relying completely on what people are paying. So that's a little unnerving because, yes, it's essential. It has to continue. So what is it going to cost those of us that do not live within a city now? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, please continue.
Yeah, no, so that's the big thing. I mean, everybody in these smaller communities pay far more for everything to start with. So it just seems to continue, from the carbon tax to all these other things that we do not have any control over, but yet the large amount of monies come from these northern communities. We have a gold mine starting right now. So province is going to benefit, but we will continue to pay.
I understand that you face sort of perimeteritis around this pretty regularly. Like people are surprised when you say, we don't have Amazon.
Right.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, we don't have Amazon. Of course not. No. Actually, when we put in our postal code, most of the time, most businesses are like, you don't exist. Sorry. So, yeah, we do exist.
How did residents adapt in these past 4 weeks? What's that been like for people in Lynn Lake and area?
It's been a lot of scrambling. So people would reach out. Anybody going to Thompson that can pick up some medication. The town had to drive the 8-hour return to take checks to some suppliers so that we would keep getting essential things to keep the town running. There's been, panic, like I said, on all sides. People have been scrambling and try to ensure that, nobody's hurt. The hospital, I haven't had a chance to connect with them lately, but I'm sure they've been scrambling too. Well, who's going to drive these blood samples out? Well, what are we going to do, with this cardiac patient that came in, and we can do this essential little test, but we need all this to make sure that they're not going to die right here. So we'll fly them out for, 10 to 40,000 instead. So it's a lot.
So some relief, obviously, now that workers will be back tomorrow, but obviously, the larger point being just to remember from your point of view here in Manitoba that it's a very different service depending on where you live in our province.
Very essential. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicki, for being with us. Have a great day.
You too.
That's Vicki Phillip. She's been with us via Zoom. She's a registered nurse. She's also a counselor in Lynn Lake, Manitoba. So we're going to hear more on the back to work legislation in a couple of minutes. Also, after 8 o'clock, we'll get more of your comments on you've been writing to us with all kinds of different points of view. I just included one relevant comment in that conversation. Right now, let's go to Heather while she's here with news updates otherwise from our news center here in Manitoba and some concerning news this morning, Heather.
Good morning. Yes, 2 high schools in Winnipeg are closed today because of email threats. The threats coming in last night at Elmwood High School in the Winnipeg School Division and Oak Park in Pembina Trails. Both those schools are now shut down for the day. Students have been told there is no school in Elmwood High and Oak Park High School today. A Winnipeg vasectomy provider, Dr. Errol Bilenkoff, says every day more young, childless men are walking in asking for vasectomies. And he says it's not just here, but his colleagues around the world say they are noticing the same thing. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
And we've got a full feature interview on that after 8 o'clock on the show as well. So thank you, Heather. Super interesting. 2 minutes now to 8 o'clock. Here's your school cancellations. Roblin and Grandview schools there are closed. That's because of road conditions. Mountain View school divisions otherwise schools are open though, but buses are canceled school division wide. In addition, Southwest Horizon School Division, school is closed, staff are at home. Buses are canceled in Colony, schools closed in Rolling River. All other schools are open. Buses not running in Beautiful Plains. School is on though. École Saint Lazare is closed. That's in DSFM. Brandon School Division, no rural buses, and Alexander O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are closed. Light snow falling, 0 in Winnipeg right now. Our temperature will fall to -5. We're expecting 2 to 4 centimeters and lots of blowing snow. Last 30 seconds are for Corey in traffic.
Yeah, Redwood and Main blocked right now. Lights are flashing red, but westbound side of it is blocked. So just look out for that. I'll have more updates on the highways, which are in very poor condition right now across the province. 204-788-3093 is the number to call.
And check 511 to that end before you're heading out this morning. I know Corey's been reminding folks. Stay tuned. World Report coming up next.
Today on Q with Tom Power. Michael Healy has spent his career seeking out Canadian stories that some see as boring, but he turns them into captivating, provocative, and award-winning theater. He'll be here to tell you why his latest work is about what happened when Google tried to build a neighborhood in Toronto.
My goal is to entertain 200 people a night. That's number one, right?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Despite Donald Trump's concern, there is actually very little fentanyl going from Canada into the United States. But some experts say money laundering and the involvement of organized crime means the threat is real. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada Post says operations will resume Tuesday morning. The company and the union have agreed to a 5% wage increase. It will be retroactive to the day after the collective agreements expired. The Canada Industrial Relations Board said negotiations were at an impasse and it was under strict instructions to order the 55,000 employees back to work if a deal could not be done by the end of the year. Janella Hamilton has more.
About 55,000 striking Canada Post employees are being ordered back on the job. It comes after 2 days of negotiations at hearings by the country's Labour Board. On Sunday, the board ruled the two sides are at an impasse. Earlier this week, the federal Labour minister said if the board determined there was an impasse, it would order union members back to work under the existing collective agreement until May 22nd of next year. Canada Post says it has agreed with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers to implement a 5% wage increase, less than what the union had previously been asking for. On Friday, Cup W was strongly critical of the federal government's intervention. CBC News has reached out to the union for comment. Canada Post says it is expecting workers back on the job at 8 a.m. Tuesday. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
With Liberals riding low in the polls and Canadians facing an affordability crisis, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is about to release her fall economic statement. This economic update is expected to be big on spending, including $1 billion in new border measures and the GST holiday that started on Saturday. Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how sustainable is all that red ink?
Marcia, we're going to hear the finance minister argue today that her big deficit is affordable based on the size and strength of Canada's economy. But the Bank of Canada warned last week that recent economic growth has been driven by Canada's surging population. So once the immigration cut announced earlier this fall kicks in, the bank's economic forecast could be cut back too. So if you're Chrystia Freeland, how do you make up for that? On Friday, she laid out some $26 billion worth of tax incentives for companies that conduct research in Canada, an attempt to boost the venture capital market, help more startups by easing restrictions on how Canadian pension funds invest. Canada's facing a serious threat as the U.S. wants to keep all its business investment to itself. And if steep tariffs are slapped on too, that further drags down Canada's economy. The $1 billion border package we're expecting today is an attempt to keep those tariffs at bay. But that, plus all the social safety net enhancements that New Democrats have demanded in this parliament, adds up. And that could be why we saw the government sell off its 6% stake in Air Canada last week. This kind of scrambling, though, doesn't inspire confidence. Or, as Goldie Hyder from the Business Council of Canada put it,
it looks like a government that's looking under the sofa's cushions for all the money it can find to pay for its spending habits.
CBC News has also learned Housing Minister Sean Fraser is about to announce he is leaving cabinet and not running in the next federal election. How does that affect what happens today?
Well, it means that we might see a last-minute cabinet shuffle now, too, before the holiday break. On top of losing his housing minister, Justin Trudeau has now lost his transport minister, his employment minister. 4 more have signaled they aren't going to run again and need to be replaced. And if they're all out, who's in? Former central bank governor Mark Carney isn't an MP, but the prospect of him being named to cabinet anyway is the rumor that just won't die in this town. But if he's joining, that could make today the current finance minister's swan song.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. A verdict is expected any day now in a French rape trial that has captured the world's attention. 51 men are accused of raping Gisèle Pellicot after she was drugged by her husband. Gisèle attended almost every day of the trial, facing her ex-husband, who admitted to arranging the assaults against her. Now the judges begin deliberations. Sarah Levitt has more from the French village at the center of the allegations.
It seems like a regular holiday scene. Festive music blaring from loudspeakers and a Christmas market taking up the main square of a small French town. But in Mazan, in southern France, there's a cloud over the celebrations. The story of the rapist of Mazan, Pauline de Peretti says, stopping there. She's talking about Dominique Pellicot, who admits over years he recruited men online to come over to his house and rape his drugged wife, Gisèle Pellicot. If many know the details, it's in part due to the 51 men on trial for allegedly taking part, yes, but mostly for Gisèle Pellicot's decision to waive her anonymity. Her well-mediatized attendance at the trial, which started in September, has been applauded by many. I'm doing it for all rape victims, she said. We're waiting for the verdicts impatiently, says Yannick Richard, who has lived in Mazan for 21 years. He calls Gisèle Pellicot a heroine and the smudge on the town a shame. The details of the case have horrified many. Dominique Pellicot has pleaded guilty, calling himself a rapist as well as the other men involved. 14 others have also pleaded guilty, the rest not guilty. This week, the 5 judges will be deliberating with a decision that comes with sentencing by Friday at the latest. And as Christmas approaches, many in Mazan hope justice is rendered. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Mazan, France.
France is rushing to aid its island territory of Mayotte. Cyclone Chido swept through the Indian Ocean islands over the weekend. It brought devastating winds and rain to the territory. Thousands of people are feared dead. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has the latest.
We have 200 French Red Cross volunteers in Mayotte, and we have been able to reach only 20 of them.
Eric Samva is with the French Red Cross. He's based on the island Reunion, but his team covers Mayotte, a French territory and part of the EU.
We still have limited information because of the difficulty of communication, but they confirm that the situation is chaotic.
Slowly, French emergency workers are starting to clear down trees and access destroyed neighborhoods. But the hospital has been severely damaged, and France's health minister says access to care has been seriously degraded. Mayotte is impoverished and spread over 2 main islands located about 800 kilometers off Africa's east coast.
In Mayotte, where there are about 100,000 people living in slums, and most of the slums have been totally destroyed. So the reality could be terrible in the coming days.
Mayotte is struggling with severe food and water shortages, and the lack of clean drinking water and sanitation has many concerned about the spread of diseases such as malaria and cholera. Cyclone Chido is estimated to have been the strongest cyclone to hit the islands in more than 90 years. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Air Canada is being put in the hot seat just as the busy holiday travel season begins. Some passengers say the airline is allowing them to be overcharged for baggage, and it faces no fines. The customers who reached out to CBC's Go Public team say Air Canada also refuses to compensate them. Erica Johnson has the story.
I was pretty upset and pretty disappointed.
Rob Eadson bought 3 Air Canada tickets for his family to fly from Ottawa to San Diego. They were a code share, meaning Air Canada sold the tickets, but the flights were operated by another airline, United. He paid a higher fare to include 1 bag per person. But when they checked in at United, the agent insisted Eadson cough up for 3 bags again.
And he just told me that's an Air Canada receipt. It doesn't apply to United. And we would have to pay for bags.
He got dinged for baggage again on the flights home. Eadson filed for compensation, but Air Canada denied the claim.
For them to just say, stonewall you and say no is really disappointing.
It's also violating federal rules that say when passengers have a ticket to and from Canada that involves more than 1 airline, carriers must apply a single set of baggage rules. John Graddick is an aviation analyst.
It's a question of Air Canada dropping the ball in making sure United knows the conditions of the fare that the passenger was ticketed on for this United Airlines flight.
Rob Eadson did get an unexpected refund after we contacted Air Canada, but it came from United. Meantime, Go Public has heard from other Air Canada passengers who were also overcharged for baggage. In all cases, the airline says it was an error. In the past 7 years, Air Canada has been fined for violating the rules. Never. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the second most read story at cbcnews.ca. It is on our main page. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Wow, it's been a busy morning here in Manitoba. Issues out on the highways and also some school cancellations because of the weather out there in rural Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg where it's mostly slushy. It's been unusually warm. Thanks for joining us here on the Monday morning show on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. So we'll update all of this in a moment. Also, Heather Wells with some news that will be pertinent to some high schools that's been just developing this morning. So that's coming up in just a minute here. First, I just want to mention what else is coming up this half hour on the show. We have a big feature interview. It is one of the pieces of our series looking at the declining fertility rate across Canada. And so we are going to hear more about why more young men without kids are getting vasectomies here in Manitoba and in fact across the country. So our series on the declining birth rate in Canada continues. Let's though first go to Heather Wells. I mentioned there's some concerning news here this morning. Hi there, Heather.
Good morning. Yes, 2 high schools in Winnipeg are closed today because of threats. Elmwood High School in the Winnipeg School Division and Oak Park in Pembina Trails are both shut down. Now, we don't know the nature of the threats, but they came in by email last night to those 2 schools. So students have been told there's no school in Elmwood High and Oak Park High Schools today. 3 Manitoba nurses were fined this year after failing to report past convictions for impaired driving. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba discovered the convictions in annual targeted background checks. It ordered 2 nurses to pay more than $10,000 each. Another nurse was censured and fined $1,000. We'll hear some reaction to that in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
And it should be clear, sorry about our series. I just mentioned moments ago. I think I said declining fertility rate at first, and I should be saying declining birth rate. Different things. Let's go to what's happening in the actual weather forecast today. Abby?
Light and blowing snow in the forecast today, which will be affecting much of the province, with temperatures ranging from -4 at this time to -21 up north. And the winds will be picking up, making it even feel colder. So the wind chill is going to feel like in the range of -32 up north this morning. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 0. That light snow blowing outside, you will feel it as you step out this morning. We're looking at about 2 to 4 centimeters. That should be blowing around when you get to the noon period. We saw some fog patches earlier that will be clearing up as you get into the day. Then that northwest winds will be picking up as you get into the morning. We'll see temperatures drop to around a -5 this afternoon, and that light snow will taper off as we get close to midnight. Then temperatures will fall to about -12. In other regions, we're also seeing this blowing snow in the south central parts and the western parts of the province, while the northern parts of the province are seeing more cold. But for Winnipeg today, we're just expecting about 4 centimeters of snow.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
In a minute, we're going to read some comments about Canada Post and how the back-to-work legislation is affecting you in Manitoba, so sit tight for that. Let's talk about problems on the roadways. So we have school cancellations and we have bus closures. Schools in Roblin and Grandview are closed. This is because of road closures and conditions. All of their Mountain View School Division schools are open. Buses are canceled, though, throughout that division. Also, Southwest Horizon School Division schools are closed entirely today. Staff are working from home. Buses are canceled and Colony schools are closed today in Rolling River. Buses aren't running in Beautiful Plains School Division, but schools on. École Saint-Lazare, same thing. École Saint-Lazare school is closed. That's in DSFM. And then Brandon School Division has no buses running in the rural areas, and Alexander O'Kelly and Spring Valley schools are closed. It's the last time I'll do that on the air because it's 8:14 and you likely know all this by now. Corey's here with an update on the roads.
Yeah, I'm going to start with the highways that are closed right now, and they're concentrated around Roblin and Russell. So Highway 83 from Silverwood, Santa Clara, through Roblin, through Russell, down to Binscarth, closed right now, as well as Highway 5 from the Saskatchewan border to Grandview, and as well as Highway 45, and this is kind of new actually, from the Saskatchewan border to Rossburn. So heads up there. Those are the highways that are closed because of the poor conditions. Poor conditions just in general on the highways this morning. Very snowy, very blowy, poor poor conditions, poor visibility all around. And that is impacting the drive. And there are some collisions out there to know about, particularly on the westbound number 1, past the East Perimeter, just before it kind of becomes firmer there in the city here. There was a collision earlier that was blocking the entirety of the road. Now there is one lane that's open. I've been hearing from people throughout the morning that traffic is kind of starting to flow through there slowly but surely. So you can get through, but it might be a bit slower or even backed up at times. As well, the lights at Redwood in Maine are completely out. They've been out all morning. Police are on scene directing traffic. So traffic on Maine in particular is flowing, but on Redwood, particularly on the west side of the intersection, is actually blocked. So you can actually get through that. So I've heard from folks saying to just avoid, if you're going down Redwood towards Maine, avoid that because you won't be able to get through if you're planning to carry on down Redwood. As well, just in general, you do want to keep an eye out if you are also heading on the southbound West Perimeter. This may still be an issue. I haven't got an update for about an hour now, but heard earlier from Maria that there are emergency crews in the right-hand lane just before Oak Bluff on the southbound West Perimeter, blocking the curb lane as they attend to a few cars that are in the ditch. But other than that, if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Corey's been really busy on those traffic lines. Thanks to everyone who's been calling, by the way, to help update us so everyone knows what's up out there. Well, speaking of updates, Canada Post, big news. Operations will resume tomorrow. Workers have been ordered back to work. So certainly the dispute's not settled. What has been settled is that Canada Post said it agreed with the Canadian Union of Postal Workers to implement a 5% wage increase right now. That will be retroactive to the day after collective agreements expired, which is about 1 year ago. So lots of impact here, 4 weeks without the mail being delivered. So let's find out how it's been impacting you here in Manitoba. Here's some comments. Judy Herskovich says she wonders, will the delivery people be angry and just dump the mail, or will they do the good work they've always done? Vic Ganini wrote in, the same way the strike affected me, not at all. Mary Swain said, the mail carriers will be busy with the Christmas season. I'm expecting a few items, but I may get them in January. Amber Anderson Skraybeck says, too little, too late. Christmas cards and parcels won't arrive on time. Wes Hildebrand says, not at all in terms of an impact of what happened with the disruption or the back to work. Marianne Rosenblum said, maybe I will get my passport in time to make my travel a reality, she questions. Christine Bruises says, it will get my stack of packages out. My Etsy store is going to rejoice. And finally, Chris Van Dick writing in, I will be able to mail out my calendars to clients. So various ways people are impacted by this. And before 8, we had a full interview about the rural area and talking about some of the critical nature of the things that the Postal Service does, and especially those rural areas in Manitoba. That was with someone in Lynn Lake who's a nurse and a counselor there. So we ask you this morning if you want to call in and let us know how will the back to work order affect your life here in Manitoba. You can call us. I've been reading comments from Facebook, but please call the show 788-3205. And just briefly here, we did get a call just now that lights at Maine and Redwood have just been restored as well. So they've now been back up. Well, up next on the show, we have been looking into some of the reasons why Manitobans are deciding to have fewer kids or no kids at all. And as our series continues this morning, we have another story about this. 1/3 of Canadian adults aged 15 to 59 in 2022 said that they did not intend to have any children, according to Stats Canada. Now, Corey, who obviously, CBC's Corey Funk, who's with us all morning, stumbled upon a story that shines some light on why some young men specifically are opting out of parenting. And so he's here with that. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you found.
Oh, thanks, Mars. Yeah, so I've been open about it. I recently got a vasectomy, and I've got 2 kids myself. They're great, but 2 is as much as my wife and I want to have. But while I was there, the physician actually told me something super duper interesting and surprising. His name's Dr. Errol Billenkoff, and he's actually kind of a big deal on Winnipeg's vasectomy scene.
I've been in practice since 1989, and since then I've done around 30,000 vasectomies.
I know his name because of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, anyone who's got a vasectomy is
Right?
like Billenkoff. Exactly. Yeah. And while he was actually doing my procedure, we got to chatting. And that's when he told me he's actually seen a shift in who's getting vasectomies. So I went back with a mic and a camera to talk more about it.
I've definitely noticed a huge change recently. It used to be very unusual 30 years ago for somebody who didn't have kids to come in and want a vasectomy. I would say it was kind of a COVID thing, that probably since the beginning of the pandemic, I started to notice this. And now it's become so common that probably a day doesn't go by that I don't see somebody who doesn't have kids and wants a vasectomy.
Did he just say a day doesn't go by now?
Yeah.
Is it just him, or are other physicians noticing this as well then?
Well, it's interesting. So he actually says he's part of an online chat group of physicians from around the world that perform vasectomies. And it's something that a lot of them have noticed too. I also just reached out to a few other physicians across Canada, and sure enough, they're noticing it as well. So Dr. Pierre Boucher performs thousands of vasectomies a year in Montreal, and here's what he told me.
Before that was maybe once every 2 months. Now it's every week. Every week I have them. Mainly in lower 30s. Sometimes a bit older. Anywhere in between 1 and 5 a week. That's a lot.
And I also spoke with another doctor in Vancouver, Dr. Neil Pollock, and he actually told me he's been seeing a similar uptick. So it seems to be a trend across the country.
Let's get to the heart of this. Why are more men without kids coming in to get vasectomies?
Right. Well, as you can imagine, because we've been doing this series so far, there's a variety of reasons. But all the doctors I spoke with mentioned some kind of reoccurring themes from the patients that they've been talking to. So the economy, climate change, and just generally wanting more freedom were some of those big reasons that they've been hearing. But I wanted to hear more from some of those men myself who've gotten vasectomies and don't have kids. So I managed to find a couple guys who were willing to chat. And first up, I spoke with Ian Clements, who actually got a vasectomy as a 30th birthday gift to himself. I went to his place and he was wearing this shirt that a friend made to commemorate the occasion. So picture this, Marcy.
Okay.
It has 2 oranges on it, and it says, "All juice, no seed." right. Pretty funny.
That's going to stay in my head for a while.
I know, right? So anyways, here's why Ian said he doesn't want kids and got a vasectomy to seal the deal.
I've kind of always thought about getting a vasectomy. Like even when I was a teenager, the thought of having kids was like just terrifying for me, and I wasn't really something I thought I wanted to do. And then later in life, after going through like multiple relationships and like being engaged and buying houses and all these things, that kind of came up later on too, where I was like, maybe I should do this. Like it makes sense for my lifestyle and for what I want with my life. When I was 30, I was with a partner who was having some issues with birth control. And, obviously condoms aren't the save-all thing for males to use. So she had brought up, like, would you ever think about getting a vasectomy? And I was like, oh, absolutely. Like, I've actually thought about this before. And, like, if this is going to help you figure out your issues, I would love to do this.
I also spoke with Daniel Kinley over the phone. He got his vasectomy back in January, so just recently, and he's engaged. And like Ian, he actually found it way easier for him to take on birth control for him and his fiance. So in terms of Daniel's choice, though, to not have kids, it's actually largely informed by his own struggle to get a foothold in the economy.
No, they're not for me. I don't see the world getting any better. I know the struggles I had when I was growing up and how much difficulties I had getting started as a young adult when I was a young adult and how precarious it is. I am a person with a disability. I have very mild autism, and it was very, very difficult for me to find a job for many years, and it's a little difficult now, even as a 34-year-old.
How interesting to hear people's, individual decisions. As an increasing number of childless men like Daniel and Ian, though, come in to, get vasectomies, is it impacting the way that doctors think about, I guess, their work?
Yeah. So still to this day, believe it or not, Mars, it's actually, not uncommon for physicians to actually refuse to perform vasectomies on men under 30, especially men without kids. The conventional medical wisdom being that the younger a patient is, the more likely they are to change their mind about wanting kids down the road. And doctors kind of saw themselves, and still to a certain degree see themselves as protecting patients from that future regret. But now Dr. Belenkoff told me that physicians are kind of starting to think differently about that approach, including himself.
I used to pretty much refuse it in cases where I didn't think it was appropriate. But through conversations with the other doctors as part of this international chat group, that exact topic did come up, and there was quite a range of attitudes about it, from the extreme ends. On one end, you've got people saying, no, there's no way you should do a vasectomy on a 23-year-old with no kids, and then others are saying, well, they got the right to, have it if they want it. Who are we to interfere with that decision? And so I think more and more we're realizing that it's really not our choice, but it's really their choice. So I do still try and discourage it. I often suggest that they get a referral from their family doctor who knows them better than I do. So if they feel that it's in this person's best interest, then I support that. But there's definitely been less resistance to doing them in younger people.
So this shifting attitude may also be partially responsible for this uptick in childless men getting vasectomy, simply because more doctors are willing to perform the procedure on them.
What else did you learn about the reasons, like why more men might be making the choice to be childless?
Yeah, well, actually, it's interesting. So I actually kind of think it kind of comes down to simply more people talking about it publicly. Zachary Neal, he's a professor of psychology at Michigan State University, and he actually studies people who choose to go child-free. And here's what he had to say.
Our data and lots of other data suggest that the number of people who say they don't want children is increasing. We do know that men are very slightly more likely to say that they don't want children than women. But what we don't know is if this is a true increase in the number of people who don't want children, or if people are more comfortable saying that they don't want children, that this has become a more socially acceptable choice to voice. And so it's probably a combination that there have always been a number of people who didn't want children, but they were reluctant to say so, combined with a true increase in the number of people who don't want children. So we think we certainly think that as people see more child-free individuals expressing this choice, they realize that it's an acceptable life course to choose. And that may partly explain the increase in numbers we're seeing.
And Marcia, I'll just leave the final word to Ian Clements, who now is actually about 5 years into his decision to have a vasectomy and still has no regrets.
I guess it kind of comes down to there's multiple ways of living a life. And I think a lot of us have kind of fallen into there's this way that we're all supposed to live. And that works good for a lot of people. But I think it really comes down to understanding what you want from your life. And if you don't want to have kids with your life, and you're a male, then maybe having a vasectomy is a good thing.
Thanks for this, Corey. Who expected that you'd go to get a vasectomy and come back with a news story?
Right.
I don't know what your next doctor's appointment is, but
I'll let you know if I have a colonoscopy or something like that, and we'll come back with a story from that.
Thank you for this.
Thank you.
That's associate producer and studio director Corey Funk. Corey also, by the way, wrote a web piece to this and helped create a great video as well. So you can find those on our website this morning at cbc.ca/Manitoba. And if you have a pitch for our Childless, Child-Free series and what's happening with the declining birth rate in this country, we're looking for stories and angles. We have more to come, but you can always pitch something to us at 788-3205.
We asked you to help make the season kind in support of Harvest Manitoba. And Manitoba, did you deliver? We donated a day of programming to help those in need, and you donated over $500,000. From all of us at CBC, thank you for your generosity, and thank you for helping make the season kind in support of those in need.
Thank you, Manitoba!
So the snow is coming down in the city right now. We're expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of this, and it's going to get windy. Our temperature will fall to -5. Right now, it's mostly slushy at 0, so take it easy. We're about to feel in the city what they've been feeling outside the city, which is kind of slick and challenging conditions after the slush turns into ice, right? Well, a couple comments before the news here. This is about Canada Post and the back-to-work order happening tomorrow. We asked how it's going to impact you in Manitoba. Deanna Stroud wrote into our Facebook page and said, on one hand, it's discouraging to see the workers are mandated to return. It takes their right and freedom to strike, which seems to defeat the purpose. On the other hand, my boyfriend's small business relies heavily on Canada Post to ship his orders, and the strike's been absolutely crippling to him, especially at this time of year. Again, I feel, she writes, it's a classic example of how the bigger companies don't seem to be overly affected by people trying to stand their ground, but it always end up negatively impacting the small companies. At the end of the day, if it's all mandated to stop, what was any of it for in the first place, she writes. I have some other folks writing in as well. Christopher Craig saying, I really think that the company's trying to break the union. I only hope the government can find a balance so the union is maintained. Other perspectives on this, Valinda Bennett writing in, it's too late for our reselling business. Plus, we're going to be sticking with other carriers for right now. The government needs to sell the business so taxpayers don't have to keep saving a sinking ship. And Albert Robidoux, Todd rather, saying it won't impact me much as I pay for my bills online. I don't miss the junk mail, but I do feel for the workers. So lots of perspectives coming in on how you're impacted in Manitoba. You can keep those thoughts coming as we hear more and learn more through the day. Right now, time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. It's still 0. That's where we've been all morning. Some light snow out there, 2 to 4 centimeters expected. The wind picking up around noon, and it's going to create some blowing snow. And our temperature falling to -5 today. We begin with some breaking news this morning. Federal Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is stepping down. Just hours before the fall economic statement is set to be introduced, Freeland has announced she is leaving cabinet immediately. It's a letter published on social media. Freeland saying Prime Minister Justin Trudeau asked her to step aside from the finance minister post late last week, offering her another cabinet post. CBC's Janice McGregor now on Freeland's letter to the Prime Minister.
And stunning, I think, also to sort of see her last week out making announcements related to the strategy of this economic statement, carrying on even as this letter reveals that she found out on Friday that she was not going to be finance minister, and presumably has had the weekend to ruminate and write this document. I think that is extraordinary. The final paragraph I'd point you to is one that is quite sharply written about how they know their time in government will end. That is a very frank thing to say out loud. You might say that's just realistic. We all watch and read public opinion surveys and can see the way the winds are blowing. But to have someone who's serving as the deputy prime minister of a prime minister who has signaled he is going to run again and believes he can win again against Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, to have his deputy prime minister put in writing and publicize a statement that says, we know our time in government is going to come to an end, that strikes me as extraordinary.
So Chrystia Freeland stepping down immediately as federal finance minister and deputy prime minister. She says she will stay on as a Liberal member of Parliament and will run again in the next federal election. We'll be hearing more on this story throughout the day, especially as the fall economic statement is set to be introduced later this afternoon. 2 Winnipeg high schools are closed today because of threats. Elmwood High School in the Winnipeg School Division and Oak Park High School in Pembina Trails both received email threats last night. Matt Henderson is superintendent of the Winnipeg Division. He says they contacted police and made the decision to close for the day.
We take it really, really seriously, and I hope that people know the gravity of when these threats are made. It really upsets people's lives. I mean, we have a daycare here at Elmwood, and so lots of folks are trying to make alternative arrangements as well. And we're in the business of teaching and learning, and now there's a day without teaching and learning.
Winnipeg police confirmed the 2 high schools received email threats and they are investigating. No word about the nature of the threats or where they came from. Parents will be informed later today about whether the closures will continue. And those 2 schools, again, Elmwood High and Oak Park High School, are closed today. More young men are getting vasectomies, even though they've never had children. Winnipeg's Dr. Errol Billenkoff has noticed it and says he's not the only one to notice.
First, I thought I was the only one who was noticing this because I don't really discuss it with other doctors, but I am part of an international chat group where doctors who do vasectomies participate, and the topic came up, and it's like everybody noticed. It was just that obvious.
Billenkoff thinks the rising cost of living and mental health crisis are to blame. He says more people now realize they don't have the financial capacity to raise a child. 3 Manitoba nurses were fined this year after failing to report past convictions for impaired driving. The College of Registered Nurses of Manitoba discovered the convictions in annual targeted background checks. It ordered 2 nurses to pay more than $10,000 each. Another was censured and fined $1,000. Sonia Udod is a nursing professor at the University of Manitoba and says facing a disciplinary panel can be scary.
There's kind of 2 sides to this, but I think that nurses are afraid to be honest because they're afraid of the repercussions. And it would be helpful, I think, if there was a process in place to help the nurses get the help they need.
The college says it does offer nurses a remedial program. And after more than 4 weeks without Canada Post mail service, holiday markets have become even more important for small business owners. Sheila Lee and her husband print their art and sell it on things like clothing items and tote bags. Lee says they rely heavily on Canada Post because using other couriers, she says, is too expensive. A market yesterday at Centennial Concert Hall gave them a chance to make their holiday sales.
It's very important to be here because now we can showcase all our products, and this is our only chance to sell to them.
Meanwhile, Canada Post says its operations will resume tomorrow after the Canada Industrial Relations Board ordered a return to work. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Oh, lots of developing news during the show this morning.
Busy
Heather.
morning.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Big thanks to Heather Wells and Megan Ketcherson and Joni Nicolo in our news department this morning. Corey, last word in the road.
Some new highway closures. Roblin and Russell, those highways are now actually open around there, but now the highways around Dauphin are closed. 20, 10, and 5 all around Dauphin are closed now because of poor highway conditions.
All right, thank you. Abby.
We're looking at blowing snow and windy conditions throughout the province for today. From Winnipeg all the way up north, we're going to see that blowing snow with strong wind chill affecting most regions. But Winnipeg, we're ending at 0 still.
All right, Abby, thank you.
Thank you.
Abby Adeyemi, as well as Corey Funk and Kevin Ipatebo, our live studio crew. Thank you guys for the show today. Thanks to the associate producers that contributed to the program today. They are Emma Fazekas as well this morning. I'm just going through all of the items here. We had Donna Carrero this morning working on items, Chidi Akuma, as well as Kalkadan Mulugeta, and of course Corey Funk with his item this half hour on the increased number of vasectomies. Take care, everyone. Be well, and we'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of Information Radio. My name is Marcy Marcusa. The Current is next on CBC.